Welcome to another episode of Summoning Insight. We're back once again this week to talk about LPL playoffs. But before we do that, first, we have some important news from 100 Thieves and Schalke. A lot of people have been getting riled up on Twitter, on social media recently about the new European Super League for soccer that is threatening to come in. People are saying it's going to be the death of the soccer clubs in Europe, the small ones especially. But thanks to the generosity of American businesses like 100 Thieves, paying an alleged $1 million buyout to Schalke 04 that we already know is in financial trouble, America is doing its part in order to make sure that European small market teams can continue. You're welcome, Europeans. Super League is still a very good idea, and we should do it in LoL. That aside, Thor, what were your takes on the Abbedagge signing? Because a lot of people were thinking Niski was going to come in, but this came out of left field. Not to me. I knew it was going to happen, but to many people.
Put it this way, the person I actually feel saddest for this whole mess is going to come out in left field for most people. Is actually Dylan Falco, who we had on this show not that long ago, basically. And the reason why is very simple, is he's stuck in that position in his career right now. We're obviously lucky he had the big gigs in the past, like he had his gig at Immortals years ago and he had his gig at Fnatic, etc. But because at the moment he's stuck in what effectively should be a mid-table team, and if anything, he's actually managed to elevate them the last couple of splits to be maybe slightly overperforming. He's in the spot that I always call the nightmare spot in esports, which is you always have to work with nothing. Like you never get like a fucking, like, you know, like a first ballot Hall of Fame guaranteed lock player come through your doors. You have to work with some motherfucker like Abbedagge who's never made it. You have to take some players, like in his case, he had to keep shuffling the bot lane and the junglers and keep going till he got the right mix. And he had one good vet, Oduamne, who left the first chance he got to a much better team, Rogue, that had the finances to potentially make him a contender. And so when you finally get another player online that they're looking good again, off they go and you have to start all over again. Because put it this way, that €1 million isn't going to go into his like budget to buy a player now. It's not like he's now going to get an even better player. If anything, he's gambling on the RLs again. So I actually feel sorry just in terms of like the Schalke players and the staff for the fact that they're in a position where you're fucked either way. If you succeed, the player just leaves. If you don't succeed, you're stuck with bad players. So I feel bad for them in that scenario. As a club, people, presumably hence Monte's joke, people already knew from the off-season when they made all that stupid furore about like, we don't want to sell, but we will have to sell, but we wouldn't want, like, listen, mate, I know what NLP is, and this isn't even the fucking tutorial. Like, this is garbage. Like, you just clearly don't have the money, so we get it that the Schalke is not in a great spot. By the way, I will just say, when all you dickheads on Reddit who were experts about business, like there's nothing, by the way, better than that meme of like, and over to the comments for the expert. The only time that I always like that is for business, because for business none of you know anything, literally nothing. You just go for what you think. So what's mad is, right, I'm told all the time that the best thing for esports is for sports teams to come in. It's not, of course, because the sports teams don't give a flying fuck about esports. One person who's never at the top of their hierarchy convinced them like this is not a bad side hustle for marketing purposes, so they do it, and guess what, the second that they run into any financial problems, they're going to bullet the esports project, you morons. So even better if they go and buy a real endemic team. All you're saying is, I hope in the future this real endemic team doesn't exist anymore. That's what happens.
I also think it's funny that in a world where we see such insane growth in LEC, in fact, the finals this year had more viewership than Fnatic and G2 finals previously. So we've seen growth even among teams that aren't the top teams. Obviously, Schalke has been on the rise kind of year over year. Meanwhile, your garbage soccer team is in relegation or whatever in Germany. And the decision you're making is, yes, let's keep our soccer team trending downwards and not our League of Legends team in a market that's shooting up, that has increased popularity and increased results from our League of Legends team. Not maybe the cut I would make. Let's put it that way. In the long run of the asset, you know.
You know the new term that people need to figure out, because I know everyone tries to memorize the buzzwords in lieu of actually knowing anything about business. Here's the buzzword you all need to learn. It's called complementary business. Because I'm getting really sick, Monte, of people bragging about businesses that aren't complementary. Like, for example, you know when they comment all the time publicly, people like, and of course, companies like TSM are turning a profit in esports, right? How would it ever make sense to brag that I own like a steel mill where I'm just taking steel out, I'm taking metal out of the earth and I'm working it and I'm turning it into materials. And on the side, right, I just have a business where I badly run an Italian restaurant and lose all my money. Like, why would I brag about that? Why would I go, well, the Italian restaurant does lose money, but I make loads of the steel mill. Well, then stop fucking doing the Italian restaurant, you daft cunt. Do you not like the money? Because what's mad is, right, Monty, if they're bragging that the guides make them all that money in the Blitz app, well, what the fuck does that have to do with Uni? How does that affect Uni playing in their team? It doesn't. It just means that what you're saying is Reginald's really good in the part of the business he's not directly involved in on the day-to-day. No shit, who's he? The fucking guy who runs the Knicks or whatever. Like, yeah, we know when you're not in the room, mate. It goes awesome. But unfortunately, the ones where you're in the room, you fuck it up, don't you? So no, anyway, and on the actual like thing, the 100 Thieves side, it's a pretty good pivot for them. I mean, I know people now will just complain about the amount they spent and whatnot, but listen, when you looked at that team, it's like I said the whole time, that team couldn't be it with the Monte or with Ryoma. Like, that wasn't going to be the T, as the kids say. You were never going to win LCS. You were definitely never going to do anything internationally. But you know what? You look at this lineup now with Abbedagge in the team, now that someday has like the residency, that's a pretty good lineup now, actually. Like, first of all, immediately that team should be a contender for summer. And who knows? They could potentially go to Worlds.
Yeah, I think definitely the expectation has to be that they go to Worlds, because they should be at least significantly better than TSM now. Because remember, in the series that they played against TSM, their problem was closing out their games. They were getting tons of early, early leads. Like, they were, I mean, Papa Smithy, I was talking to him about it. He was not pleased when I mentioned this, but I said, like, I've never seen a game or a best of 5 in League where one team is up 4 games in a row and then loses 3-1. But I think that's a fixable problem, and certainly to his credit. And we can talk about the Reapered switch too, because Reaper, they let go of Ziggs as their coach. They're bringing in Reapered. It's also important to mention, just to roll back a little bit, the situation that caused Abbedagge to kind of be free for 100 Thieves to buy out, because his contract was expiring at the end of this year, and all indications point to the fact that he would have probably left the roster anyway. So if you're a Schalke fan and you're frustrated by this, I think, you know, he was going to go to NA or maybe Fnatic or wherever, probably a bigger name team, because he's had very strong individual performances, I would say. And so he was going to become a hot prospect. So if you're Schalke, why not get money now for a buyout rather than just let him enter free agency, right? So it makes sense for them to kind of unload him at the current point in time, especially considering, like you mentioned, Thorin, what we know about the financial state that they have publicly said about the team. So that said, there was also Niski, which was potentially an interesting pickup, especially because he and Closer both speak Turkish and are good friends. But you know what's interesting about Abbedagge is that he played on a team called Royal Bandits with Closer in Turkey in 2018. And not only that, Freeze, who is currently 100 Thieves coach, was also on that roster.
I'm sure this is all connected. I'm sure you've had some input, you know, etc.
Yeah. So considering
he's also, by the way, if people think about what the complaint this last split was about, it was all about like, but we must have Ryoma because he's the mage player. Listen, Abbedagge is a fucking mage player. That's exactly what he does in his game. So it also fits what they need.
Yeah. And also, here's the other thing. Broken Blade was the top laner of that roster too. So, you know, he had played previously with Broken Blade on this Royal Bandits. Amazing how many kind of players that were able to come out of this. But it is in many ways a reunion of Closer and Freeze over on 100 Thieves, which I think made it probably an attractive destination. And if you're a 100 Thieves fan, you should probably be pretty excited about this, because you're not starting at zero synergy between mid and jungle, right? These guys have played together. They have that experience. Yes, it was a couple of years ago, but at least you're not starting from square one. So I think in terms of this too, if you look at the available options, so if Niski was indeed an option, if Fnatic was willing to deal him, we don't know about that. There were just rumors. So I think if I had to pick between Abbedagge and Niski, I probably would have taken Abbedagge, just because I think he has a higher ceiling and more versatility, even though Niski seems like a stylistically pretty good match for 100 Thieves. I think either would have been a good option. What do you think?
The problem is this, right? This is why on the one hand, I like comparisons, but I seem to be the only one who knows what metaphor and analogies are, because other people, this is how you know literalism has just ruined people's brains, Monty. In the same way as people get offended when you compare two things, right? People themselves will compare two things and act like they just are a one-to-one match. So when we compared Nisqy to Doinby, dude, I think people actually believe that's like for real. I just mean like it's the closest stylistic explanation for why a mid laner would play for his jungler. In terms of actual game, like, I hope people don't actually think Doinby's an actual meme. Like, it's funny, his narrative, but he is actually a genius about League of Legends. I hope people watched fucking FPX in the playoffs understand this. Like, the guy, and by the way, he definitely does not have non-existent mechanics. He just doesn't have god-tier mechanics.
His Oriana game in the finals is superb.
So my problem is this, right? The reason why I'm making this distinction is here's the difference. As you've already seen, you can actually have Doinby and not only win the LPL, but Worlds. You can win anything with him. I don't think, unfortunately, you can win, like, much with Nisqy. Like, I think you can be a decent LCS team, but I don't think you're ever going to do, like, massive things. Like, he might be helping his team, but Doinby is his team. The joke is Doinby is the StarCraft player, and they're just the fucking units, aren't they? Like, that's, like, did anyone even, we'll talk about it with Nelson, that entire style they even use now is genius, where they just load one side of the map and just tell the other guy, just fucking calm down for 5 minutes. Like, it works. Like, they have a whole style that just works. Nisqy isn't bringing that. He's just a guy who he's just a guy who's the sacrificial mid laner and knows how to roam to the other lanes. Like, so to me, I think people have like conflated the two a little bit too closely there. Like, I don't think he's like an automatic winner in the way Doinby is. So of the two, I'd rather have Abbedagge. I think Abbedagge still hasn't proven that much. Like, obviously, hasn't done much internationally yet. We've only seen a few playoff runs, but like the raw skills seem to be there. And then when I look at the LCS, I think mid lane and LCS isn't that hot at the moment. So I think he has a chance to be one of the absolute best players. Like, this is bearing in mind how influential position is. If he does well, he will be an MVP candidate essentially.
Yeah, I think absolutely that's true. And to me, these moves really put 100 Thieves right in contention for being potentially a title holder, right? And I think that when you look at the coaching change, I also agree with this coaching change for a few reasons. I think that we didn't see a lot of development out of the roster. I think one of the big complaints with 100 Thieves was that they were pretty static from the lock-in tournament all the way through the end of their run in the spring playoffs or whatever, mid-season showdown, these terrible names that they come up with that all sound the same.
I do. We never even addressed that, Monty. That's how stupid Riot is. That they want to openly signal to everyone in 2021 they're still treating LCS as the flagship project, while all the other world wins all the world championships and even Europe's more than fun. They're still going to. So even though every other region is just called the LPL playoffs, or no, America is like very closely tied to the branding of the very important like #1 seat. Like I mean, America will never win. Like, what even is this, Riot? What are you? You a fucking meme, aren't you?
I also just don't like the name Mid-Season Invitational because it's boring and doesn't sound very prestigious, right? Like Invitational does, but mid-season just makes it sound so anticlimactic.
Dude,
right?
Invitational is probably the stupidest part of it. Why do Riot insist on doing things where they don't even literally understand the words they're... like, League Championship Series isn't a series, it's a league. They meant League of Legends. It's not even a series. Then you go for mid-season invitational. It's not an invitational. You win automatically by winning your region. They can't uninvite you. You're #1. So invitational would be, by the way, like if Dan1 didn't win LCK, they were like, we choose to invite Dan1 anyway. No, whoever wins LCK gets to go. Like the people who name these, it's like someone just told them invitational sounds classy and prestigious, and they just named it that for no reason. So I don't get it myself, Monty. I don't get it at all.
I also just get tilted from like an English language perspective when they do things like use acronyms to create more acronyms, because remember LCS stands for League of Legends Championship Series, so they shortened the League of Legends into its own acronym. It's just meta English right there with so many like it's layers.
Like YOLO once or whatever. That's all people say. Yeah,
I'm just caught in some sort of postmodern nightmare when I look at the names. It's not my favorite. I'll say that.
I do appreciate though, by the way, as you alluded to earlier, the best part about this news, if you really think through all the perspectives and how it might change things, is that even though TSM isn't in this story at all, they're not a team dealing a player, they're not a team signing a player. The joke is the ultimate end goal is like TSM does lose a spot. Like that's the joke. I was saying before, like maybe 3 weeks ago, Monty, the sad thing about playoffs was there's no way 100 Thieves and Dig, etc. were going to beat TSM. So probably they do just get the third spot and just get to go to Worlds anyway. The joke now is they don't. Like now there's going to be very hot competition for that last spot. And that's if no one else even makes any other moves. Like, by the way, God forbid, like definitely ever actually hits like a few months worth of form, or there might actually be an interesting playoffs next time around. Like all of a sudden it's actually gotten pretty interesting. That's how bad TSM's done in general. Like someone does one move and you're just out already.
Well, they did do 2 moves. So let's talk about Reapered as well, because I alluded to this before. I think their progression was pretty flat, and especially with this roster, you would have expected them to improve. Now, Someday didn't have the greatest performance, definitely true in the spring split. Perhaps this will reinvigorate or motivate him, having Abbedagge in the team. Certainly, it will relieve some pressure from the top lane, because there's going to be an actual source of pressure in the mid lane that teams are going to have to be concerned about, and that also will allow, I think, the rest of the team a little bit more wiggle room in terms of where they are getting their carry performances from, and dimensionalizes their style in many ways. So that said, Reapered comes in. So Reapered, for those of you who don't know, has been in Los Angeles this entire time since he left Cloud9. And so
was he just doing nothing, just chilling, doing nothing? Or was he working with someone?
He was not.
I know a lot of those
he's not working with. He wasn't working with...
People don't know, nowadays, like some of those coaches will go and do sort of like assistant coaching, but they don't make it public and stuff behind the scenes nowadays, don't they? Like there's a lot of people get work somehow.
Yeah, he might have been, but I do not think so. Okay. I could be wrong on that. I do know that he was talking to some teams from around the world about various positions, but I think probably he probably wanted a break after all those years of coaching, back to back. And I think for him, this is a really great opportunity, because basically he gets to swoop in with a roster that is going to be significantly better. And you'd have to say that this is definitely a favorite to make Worlds, this new 100 Thief roster at the current point in time. So it seems like a pretty easy job for him. And I think Reapered has done with Cloud9 in the past. We can debate his drafts, the playoff performances of some of these teams. When I was working with Cloud9 and doing interviews with him that were aired publicly, he said that he had really lost motivation at the Worlds in 2019. And so he took a lot of responsibility for the collapse of that roster at Worlds that year. And I think maybe he was a little bit burnt out. So he has been pretty public with a lot of what he feels were his personal mistakes or not living up to that reputation. But I think with a break now, and I think the fact that he can, I think, push the team harder than Zix can. And I think that his personality and his more aggressive tendencies are probably more in line with what the 100 Thieves roster requires to take them to the next level.
The problem is with Reapered is like this. It's not even that his drafts was stupid. Like, I'm not saying that he did drafts that were, like, objectively bad and there's no logic to it. Like, I'm not doing that at all. My problem with this was, like, he literally... It's one of the reasons why you should be careful, like, which pro players you want to become coaches. Because in the same way as, like, the obvious example people always give is you wouldn't want, like, some superstar athlete in a team spot to be the coach, because odds are he won't understand things like how do you sacrifice for the team, how do you help another player get enabled, because he's never done any of those things. He was just having those done to him.
Is this an indictment of Bjergsen?
No, I mean, it's one of the obvious reasons why I personally didn't think Bjergsen would be some straight fire coach and be God's like every other idiot did, who I noticed has just gone mad silent about the whole playoffs. They just never mentioned Bjergsen. He just didn't exist during the playoffs, Monte. That's how genius this guy's career is. His whole playing career is he doesn't have any help when he's just a person not helping. Just don't bother mentioning him. No, but the thing with Reapered is this. To me, the reason why I nailed super early that like Reapered was going to continually do the 200 IQ drafts and fuck the team is one of the other problems is this. It's very different being a leader and a shot caller, given the plan, when you also then are the guy who then enforces that it gets activated. Like, you're in the server doing that plan. Like, the whole point is, when you're the shot caller and a leader like that, you manage the plan and you make sure people stay on track. And it doesn't matter if 20 minutes into a game someone forgets what the win condition, you're there to remind them. His problem was he was like setting all the pieces, going for one of those, I forget the name of it, you'll know what it is. What the name of those machines where, like, you know, a ball drops off like a fucking, like a fucking diving board and it lands in some beams that go into an egg and then an egg goes.
I'm blanking on it.
It's like a famous name for a type of machine. Everyone knows it. Everyone's seen it on YouTube. It's like he was trying to set one of those up like that, but then he wasn't, because he wasn't
contraption. That's it.
Yeah,
sorry.
But then his problem is he wanted it to be like that, where he only had to press the button at the beginning and it all went perfectly. It's like, as we all know from everyone who's tried to ever debate LS, it's not going to go flawlessly at that. So in my opinion, he was an example of someone where it's like his draft was trying to show me that he's a genius about the game. And I'm like, well, I agree, but your team can't do that, what you're telling them though. But he was just like, he wanted his bonus points for doing that. Sometimes in the game, I've said this many times, just the simple draft that works is the right draft. You don't have to show everyone you're a genius, mate. Just do the simple draft that lets you win the game. So to me, that's why I'm interested to see what he'll do with this lineup, because there's so many moving parts to this lineup. Some of these players have done fuck all historically. It's not like these are all like proven winners. That I'm very interested to see whether he can actually make this team a no champion or not.
I'm curious what happens with Someday too when he has a Korean coach and especially a former professional top laner as well. Because if there's a way to potentially reinvigorate Someday, that might be the key to doing it, right? Where you have a coach that is intimately familiar with that position, can speak directly in Korean to each other. I think it might be a big help if you're trying to turn Someday around. But Someday, I think, can be motivated highly, I think, by the green card and this entire mid lane process. If I was Someday, I'd be feeling pretty good right now and ready to kick some ass in the summer. So
he's one of those players I don't worry about, mate. When you've played as long as he has and you've always come back to the top again, he's going to be good again in like 2 months or something, isn't he? Like it's just obvious.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll take a quick break right now, guys, and get Nelson on to talk about LPL playoffs. I'm sure he has some takes as well on the 100 Thieves move. He has been watching everything, so we're gonna talk about LPL playoffs for a while and LPL Finals in particular, and then we'll probably talk some more generally about MSI because he's been keyed into a lot of those matches in those regions. So we'll see.
And we'll have loads of the viewer questions as well because we're going to make up for the ones we missed last time.
Yes, we will. All right, we'll do that. All right, we'll see you in a couple, guys. All right, welcome back. We're here with Nelson, former LNG coach. You have any exciting prospects coming up, Nelson, that you can discuss? Or are you just keeping low profile right now?
Yeah, I mean, I probably would have found a team already, or already have, but I just can't reveal it yet.
Very good. Are you in Singapore right now?
Yeah, I am. I mean, like the only thing I could say is it's in a tier 1 region. Like right now, major region is like outdated, right? Riot changed the term into tier 1.
Let me ask you, is NA a tier 1 region?
I think the joke is he was implying it wasn't. That was the joke, wasn't it?
Just making sure you're not going to announce an LCS team, right?
Oh, I mean, probably not.
I mean, the thing is, to be fair, technically, I'm just going to start treating Riot at face value. So logically, right, if the mid-season showdown, that's a showdown between teams in the mid-season, if that takes place in just the North American League, but an invitational sounds like just a fun exhibition tournament. If that's the one for the international one, well, presumably the showdown's better. Therefore, NA is actually the best region by Riot's own logic. I didn't do it right.
In their fantasy.
So TSM finished 3rd in the best tournament in the mid-season. The showdown. No, not the invitational, the showdown.
Didn't you see the tweet by Fionn? I mean, since C9...
Which, you're going to have to narrow it down more. Which bad take of Fion's were you thinking of? Come on,
I mean, hit me with it. Yeah, didn't he say like C9 could be the best team? Then
I do know. Listen, at the risk, like Nelson, we have to be careful here because unfortunately we ranted about this last episode. We can't make every episode have like a 20-minute section where we address Fion's latest tweets. Like we'll leave that to the esports talks of the world to just do that sort of lowbrow content. But I will say, I think what you're referring to is I know like another take he had, Monte, was sort of like he was even though I personally did the opposite. Like the second Mad Lions won Europe, I remember just thinking like, fuck, like this is basically just LPL versus LCK now for MSI. Yep. Everyone else apparently, like Fionn, went the opposite, and they were like, I think it's wide up. Like, sure, okay, then I guess right. Let's just reset all the filters. Up is down, black is like, left is right. Oh, yep, yeah, I guess it is. Fuck, why not? Yeah, shit, go.
I appreciate that because who can truly know anything in the world, right? He's just super committed, to the complete lack of wisdom. He's a sports nihilist, as it were.
I have always been a massive fan of what I actually genuinely, it's called the Travis Gafford way of thinking about the International League, which goes like this. But how could we know which team's better, Monty? We'd have to have them play to know that. Essentially, what you're arguing is like that's why I brought up the joke, because what you're actually implying, Monty, is just like that. It's that you existentially question like what is even possible to know, and you can't ever contrast things because they would have to actually happen, Monty, before you can ever predict something.
See, here's the thing. I actually had a theory of knowledge class in high school, and that's the level of education that question should be taken. Now, if you have successfully completed your high school studies, we should be able to move past that into reasonable discussions of outcomes and theoretical possibilities, right? And that's what we're going to do.
Someone should definitely, though, associate that whole like copium meme that everyone's loving right now with like NA, because whatever happens with NA, it's like that, isn't it? It's like at least Mad won, so in Europe, so we might win this time. I think the meta actually now means C9s could win MSI. Like, the copium is just too much, guys. You're going to overdose at this rate. Just, fucking temper it just a little bit every now and then. It's too much, isn't it? They've gone too far.
Okay, so before we get into the LPL, I do want to do a sanity check here with Nelson on the other regions that we're discussing.
Yes, let's do it.
Yeah.
So first off, let's get your take before we move any further on the Reapered and Abbedagge to 100 Thieves move.
I mean, I think it's a great move for them, right? Because I think firstly they got a coach with a lot of experience at Worlds internationally. In China as well. He was on EDG.
Yes,
I think it's a good move overall because, like firstly, I think you either need to spend a lot of time learning or have a lot of experience in coaching if you're not an ex-player, right? And Reaper has both.
He's both, yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which is very, 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 very important. And he's one of the few people who actually has that he has been a pro player at the highest level and he has coached for so many years.
I think what's also important about Reapered is that he is, as a human being, very confrontational. So he has no issue. I've said this before. He is one of the least Koreans that I have ever met. And
it's probably one of the reasons, in case people don't know, why he isn't coaching in Korea. Like, it's actually, the joke there is like, look, LS, could you maybe just like get a fucking bead on reality? If Reapered can't even coach in Korea, probably ain't gonna happen for you, mate. He's actually Korean. I don't know if you noticed that. But as Monty's pointing out, he's just not very Korean, is he?
He's very aggressive. He does things he's kind of mischievous in the way that he sometimes like circumvents Korean cultural rules in ways that other Koreans can find unsettling or shocking. I find it quite entertaining personally. I think I really appreciate his character, but he is very blunt and very straightforward, which is not typically the typical Korean mentality. And so I think like in that way he is. And he would be, I would say, blunt for any culture on planet Earth. And so I think he has the capability of really controlling Western rosters in a way that most even Western coaches do not have. So I've always really appreciated that about him as a character trait that I think makes him a good coach.
I mean, basically, he's just one of the few coaches where he's going to run the team, not the player.
Yes.
At least in NA, right? Yeah.
There is also Bjergsen in TSM who's responsible for every single thing that happens in TSM. I know that because all the people in the offseason told me he's a great coach and that he could get all the credit. So if you get all the credit, get all the blame. Therefore, his fault they came finished it. Thanks for coming to my TED Talk. I mean, one of those memes in all the kids love at the end.
Actually, their roster actually makes a little bit of sense, I guess. Like the way they build the roster, right? I'm not sure if anyone thought about TSM building their roster. Like they basically want to create Suning in NA, and the only player who could potentially be a crazy top laner is Suni, but it went the other way around,
Well, I don't know if you could. I suppose the theory is somewhat there, right? But the difference is that if you're going to get a rookie 80 carry, you can't like gamble on him being Huan Feng, right? Because that guy was just incredibly good and was providing a lot of the carry potential of that roster. And it seems kind of crazy that you could expect Lost to even play comparatively that well to other North American 80 carries.
No, I mean, it's because 80 carry is the lowest it's a low skilled role in the game. and basically I think they're just trying to make have a weak side, and he's inexperienced. You just have to play like kind of weak side, or basically as long as you can farm up for the late game, it's fine, right? I don't have to play through you. But I think what ended up throughout the season was actually their strong point was bottom side, kind of.
By the way, when he says that, I actually think I can already translate, but I'll ask for clarification. When you say like lowest skilled, right, that's going to confuse some people, Nelson, because obviously it's like a very mechanically demanding role. I think when you say lowest skilled, you essentially mean like it's the simplest to play, right, as a pro. Like you do basically just auto attack and then you follow the fucking support group with the team. Like that, you were along those lines, right, when you were saying that?
Yeah, as in, you have most of the time, I would say 99% of AD carries, they have other people thinking for them.
There you go, right. Just so it makes sense. Yeah, sure.
I mean, they're basically the dog of the team, right? The support is the master who says, stay here in lane, don't die, sit dog. I'm going to go out and do things, and I'm going to come back and take care of you later, right?
Yeah, unless you're
like
the best AD, you're like UZI, then of course it's different.
Yes. It's why I actually have respect. I know it sounds complicated, but it's like what I was explaining on one of those. I can't remember if it's this show or the Crackdown when I was talking about the whole like Reckless angle. Technically, for his role, Reckless actually plays the position perfectly. He just does exactly like the safe style that he should. The point is, though, if you are the best, you break the rules of the role. So if you're UZI, at that point in time, the reason you should literally be shot calling everything you want in your team is because you have all the resources and all the skills. So it's like you're the one who knows how you can win the game. What you're telling the others is, come and join me. Look, do what I say, and we'll win the game. At that point, it's actually appropriate for the AD carry to be the shot caller, in my opinion, or to take charge and, say like, look, run everything through me because I can win the game right now. That doesn't apply to many people, though, let's be real. I
mean, I don't think it applies to anyone because he's the only player which I could see that the entire team is like 10k behind, right? But if UZI is at the same amount of goal, then he can win the team fight on his own. So I haven't seen anyone like at the same level, at least.
Do you have any takes on the rest of the LCS playoffs before we dive into some of the, because we had a long conversation last week. 4 out of the 5 games were incredibly sloppy in the Liquid C9 series. It did not fill me with confidence, but then that last game was really well played from the level 1 on C9. If you recall, I don't know if you remember specifically those games, but did you have any takeaways? What's the level of hope that NA should be expecting right now? Because I will say that the big boon to NA was the announcement that the Vietnamese team will not be competing, because that was a real, I have to say, you never know. And that was probably the biggest chance of NA not being top 4, right? And that is now, that obstacle has been removed. And for you guys who don't know, the Vietnamese teams, the VCS, unfortunately couldn't get visas to go to Iceland during the pandemic. So Riot has said that they will be competing with one fewer team, which also makes it easier for the CIS region team to make it out of groups.
I mean, I think Cloud9 was clearly the best team, right? Like, I remember I said it somewhere as well, but it's just because they have perks. I think the other players, yeah, they're good, and they're better than the other players in NA right now. I feel like at least for C9, they have the best players in every role, and the best team as well. And that's only because I think some of the players in TL are just playing really badly right now. Basically, I would say like TL just played like a full native roster. It doesn't matter. They just play really bad. But C9 as well, like in the series, I think they kind of choked a bit or made bad calls or were playing too aggressively. But I was actually quite impressed the way they play with perks. I was more impressed, like with perks himself. Like the other players, they were inconsistent. Yeah.
I think that's a fair take. To go back, do you think you say they're best in role? So you would say that Fudge has been performing better than Alphari, because it was really Alphari that was the standout player of Liquid throughout the season in the playoffs, and people expected that to be potentially the way the Team Liquid won the series, and he did have some good games.
No, Alphari just played like he never seen, or he never played jungle before, in solo queue. Like there's no way you can get ganked. It's impossible to get ganked. It's impossible. Like if you go to a Chinese team and you die like this in scrims, you're gonna get a flame for sure.
That's true.
You know, that's one thing I didn't understand entirely. Everyone tried to make it like, well, it's obvious, you know, if you see 9, you would just attack Alfari over and over again. Look what he did to TSM. But the part I don't get is what Nelson's saying is, why did Alfari not get that memo? That's the part I don't get. I totally get why C9 would try and play that way. I would try and play that way as well. If I'm TL, by the way, I would also be cognizant of that. There'd be certain games where I would just tell Alfari, just play extra safe now.
I think it's tricky because they were running with a sub jungler who may not have been able to execute like an Alfari focused game plan. But I do agree that if you're in that situation, that it's Alfari's responsibility to play a little bit more conservative.
Dude, it's the longest lane. You already get ganked in when your jungler is there. Like, it's the hardest to fucking not get ganked in, isn't it?
I mean, I think the game is not as hard as people think, you know? Like for example, if I tell you, what if you can memorize the timers of all 6 of the enemy camps?
Holy shit.
Is it easy for you to find out where a jungler is? Of course it is. Like, every jungler I coach could do that, and I coach some not very good junglers in LPL as well.
Do you have the secret of this forbidden knowledge, Nelson, about jungle timers?
Yeah, I mean, you just remember, it's 2 minutes. like the moment the enemy jungler shows on the map, you need to know what's his exact path, whichever camp, which order, and because you play more solo queue there, you should know what's the clear time for each jungler. What's the fastest possible clear time for each jungler?
Oh, by the way, Monte, because obviously we'll get into this when we talk specifically about the matches. I also saw, just as an update for people if they don't know, because he still does this, right? I saw a highlight clip where Doinby goes in, he kills someone under the tower on Akali, and then he flies back out. And while he's doing it, he's typing the timers and pressing enter.
Yeah, it's amazing.
He's still doing that shit, by the way. Like, this is where I told people, like I said in the intro before, right? People have got to stop pretending like all he does is just not play mid lane and then walk somewhere. No, what you guys are missing out in your yada 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 and they win worlds is the entire thing. Like, just leaving the mid lane is not the guy's. It's his understanding of the game. Basically, like I found actually, I sadly, you know what I tried to do that distinction like a few months ago. Like players who know how to win and players who know how to play the game. No, the real difference is this: there's players who know how to play their lane and there's players who know how to play the map. And if you know how to play the map like Doinby does, why would you stick around in your lane and just get 4 CS more if you could do something way more impactful? Because no, like the idea that like he does that, it's the same back in the day when LS pointed out that people like Faker use all their function keys to see all the lanes all the time like a jungler, right? Every Westerner goes, yeah, anyone could do that, and then Gelman amnesia wipes himself and just doesn't ever do it for the next 6 years. Like what? Like, dude, and any of you Westerners who want to go, Korean solo queue and so doesn't take Korean solo queue to type timers in. So how about you start doing that if you're the mid lane and you're a shot caller, and then get back to me in 6 months and we'll see how you're doing. Because in theory, these should be basic things. You just have to do it.
So here's what I've noticed coming from an RTS background and then coming into a MOBA in League of Legends is that the difference, one of the core differences between RTS players and MOBA players is that any RTS player will be spamming hotkeys at the beginning of a game. So you're sitting there in StarCraft or in Warcraft and you're starting your initial build and you're setting all your hotkeys. All players who are serious about the game will be like moving their hand constantly to warm up their hand and to get into a rhythm of speed in order to hit hotkeys. So these hotkeys are not doing anything at the end of the game. Often you're just like hitting 1 2 1 2. Yeah, 1 5 1 5 to like in between unit control groups and buildings. But the point is that you want to maintain that consistency throughout the game so that later in the game, when you're macroing and microing at the same time, you're still going at the same speed. What I have noticed about even professional MOBA players is that the majority of them do not have this same approach. They are sitting there taking a drink of water as they're walking back from base.
Dude,
right?
I'm not even trolling. I'll give you an exact example that'll blow your mind. Right, one of the greatest Western players of all time, inarguably, is Meteos. I've watched him play, mate. No joke, he could play with one hand. Like, except when you have to obviously press the abilities. Like as in he's literally, he's moving the screen with the mouse and then clicking where he wants to walk to. Like, people already, by the way, are watching this VOD now who are morons going, what are they even talking about? Because again, you don't get it, guys. Like, we're talking about basic things. That's how far the Westerners are behind.
Yeah, and I think that when you look at timers, and it was even more crazy in League of Legends. Here's a boomer League of Legends take for you. But what Korean players used to do in like 2013, 2014 was that the support players especially would play in windowed mode. in League of Legends, and they would have a notepad open. They'd have Windows Notepad open on their screen, and they would have all of the flash timers and like jungle timers in there, and they would constantly be tabbing out to modify it, selecting all the text, and then pasting it back into the game chat for the rest of their team. Right. So they were always kind of like in between the game and this notepad. Now, it's not necessary to do that anymore, partially because Riot made the game easier in that
That's true.
they put jungle timers in the map now,
Yes.
like you can tab and see the jungle timers. You didn't used to be able to do that. And then also like you can kind of select the text from previous chat iterations and get your summoner timers now. So that is one of the reasons why these teams were so good at macro. And speaking of that Doinby play, seeing that where he knows he's going to be safe, because the jungler, I believe, is in the mid lane in that clip, and he's just like, I'm totally fine. Here's some refreshers on summoner timers, was pretty crazy to watch. But I think it's been really interesting to watch Doinby, because I think that he has gotten better since the Worlds win. I think he was more one-dimensional at the Worlds win than he is now. And I think that watching some of these FPX playoff series, now, I will be the first to say, guys, that LPL is definitely my region of weakness. So we'll be asking a lot of questions.
Also has the most
to Nelson.
games as well. So it's like no one can really watch it unless you just dedicate your whole life to it, pretty much.
Right. So we're asking a lot of questions
Yes.
to Nelson here. So I can speak to what I saw in the playoffs. But as far as the entire narrative of the season, I was seeing games here and there, and I do not have a full picture because I have another job. But I think it's interesting to see, because for me, looking at Doinby now and seeing especially his performance on Orianna in game 1 of the playoffs, as well as some of his performances in the previous match versus RNG, I was really impressed with his abilities. And I think that he was really pretty good over the course of the playoffs. So, and then LWX was a major issue. But I think that as we come into this discussion, we need to frame it for people who may not have been as attuned to the LPL to talk about the stories, because everybody probably tuned in for the finals, or the vast majority of people who would watch this show have seen a couple of games from those finals. But it's important to know how they got there, because coming into those finals, the expectation was, despite the fact that Royal was 14-2, I think they only lost to JDG and then Billy, like one other team
in the regular split. You're on
in the regular season. So they come in as the number 1 seed into the playoffs. They immediately, upon entering the playoffs, get put in the dumpster by FPX 3-0. And then both of the teams, FPX and Royal, end up beating EDG in the semifinals in order to make it to the finals. RNG also beat Top. So they were close series. Both of them were Royal winning 3-2. And people thought, reasonably, coming into the finals, that, okay, FPX, they've had troubles this season. They were cycling their jungler. Now they're back on track. They're looking really good now that Tian's back in the jungle. They beat the best team in the regular season. They are going to be heavy favorites coming into the playoffs. So let's start with that narrative. Nelson, what did you think about Royal, having watched them, RNG, watched them in the regular season when they lost to FPX and then coming into the finals? Did you still think that they were a heavy underdog?
As for RNG, I think, since they won now, I think I could say is, if I'm not wrong, they were the only team who kind of had a day off or something. But every other team didn't have a day off, and at least that's what people told me, right? So
he means like I bad day. He doesn't mean a day off literally.
No.
They didn't play badly.
No, what I meant was literally like a few days off, like off rest.
FPX didn't get any day off. How's that possible? They weren't playing.
No, you choose not to have a day off because you're scrimming.
Oh, I see. Now I get the condition. Right, you weren't talking about official matches. Okay.
Yeah. You choose not to have a day off because you're scrimming, right?
Okay.
And, I think that's what caused them to ramp up too slowly. But I guess they managed to catch up. And even then, I always thought that they were like top 3 in regular season. I think it was like FPX, RNG, or EDG were going to win.
So did you think that FPX would win the finals before it started, or did you have hope for Royal?
I felt FPX would win because I think they have the best top laner, or technically they have the best top laner, right? And then
In the world,
they
yeah,
were-
probably.
yeah, in the world probably. And
Yeah, it's reasonable. I mean, I think Zhao Hu himself even said after the final, even though we won, actually Naguri is the
Yeah.
best top laner, so fair play. Respect that he actually gave it up.
And I felt like FunPlus FPX was more well-rounded overall in every single role, because like Doinby, he has been working a lot on his laning phase since last split. Yeah, since summer of last year, he has been working a lot on his laning. And you guys, if people watch LPL a lot, they would have noticed that he has been doing a lot more in laning phase. Have been playing a lot of champions. Like I don't even remember when I saw him play Akali before.
Yep.
Yeah,
it was a noticeable difference to me over the course of this season so far, how much better he's gotten. So that's really dangerous too, because if there was one kind of flaw, even though FPX's style was good enough to win worlds, and certainly they're a world-class team using that, they did at sometimes, if you had to criticize them, lack dimension. And I feel like his individual improvements have really made a huge difference in this roster's ability to play, which is very interesting.
Yeah, and their bot lane, I mean, like LWX, of course, he made a lot of mistakes, but he had his champion pool. If he had those champions, he is fine. You know, Kai'Sa, Xayah, and
Yes.
and the support matchup, of course, I think support is like even, because I think Ming is the best laning support in the world, but he has worked on other parts of the game as well. And Crisp is the best, or like overall support. You know, he's good in everything, which is why if you see RNG just ban 5 supports.
I was going to ask you about that, because that was a difference that we saw from the first time these teams played. You really saw an adaptation in Royal's draft strategy, where they decided, okay, we're just going to ban out all of Crisp's supports, force him onto a Galio or kind of a subpar pick. And that I thought it was genius, because I think it really exposed LWX in a lot of ways, right? When you limit Crisp's ability to carry, then LWX was pretty appalling over the course of this series. I mean, I don't know if it was nerves, because he was even making like mechanical errors. Like if you look at the way that they were playing in some of these instances, he was checking auto attacks, right? I think it was game 3 was the one where they were attempting to all in, and he was just checking his auto attacks, so he wasn't actually firing, which caused them to lose a 2v2 effectively. So there were a lot of like very strange decisions. LWX was also, he was just like in range of Ming constantly, so he would have to burn summoners or just die because he was getting hit by Leona abilities. There were some really like fundamental errors in positioning and mechanics that LWX was making in this series. Do you think that was a result of them making Crisp uncomfortable, or did LWX just have a bad day?
I mean, I think LWX just had a bad day. You know, it happened at Worlds as well. And
I mean, he was the worst player on that team at Worlds.
I mean, back then I think AD wasn't that, like the skill difference between ADs weren't too huge. But I think right now, I think after the first game, like FunPlus might have had like a false sense of security, right? Because they won with Galio, so they thought even if Galio is fine, but I think Galio as a champion is just too hard for Crisp to impact the map, because he's just too I would just say like too clunky to play, right? It's not like Thresh or Blitzcrank where he can throw a hook and make a play.
What do you actually think of the FPX style of play, though? Because like people are probably familiar, Nelson, with like the style that they won worlds with, where they used to just basically take Doinby the jungler and just go bot lane like the perfect time every time and just win every game, and no one could. That's why G2 couldn't even get in the game, if people remember from that world's final. Right now, they obviously play a bit differently because they don't have Gimgoon, they have Naguri now, who, as we say, is probably the best top laner in all regards right now in the world. So in theory, they play both sides of the map now, but I noticed they still do have a formula to how they play. Like basically, if you can track where the jungler is, you probably know which side of the map they're going to fucking gank on now. What do you think of the way that FPX actually plays the game at the moment, the meta read?
I think the meta right now is all about setup and learning how to set up and how to react. You know, if the enemy tries to contest your setup, and I think FPX is, if you look carefully at game 1, then they are the best at setting up in the LPL, like how to set up for dragons 4 or 5 minutes ahead of time, and you have to know, right, that dragon. The time between dragons is 5 minutes. So
give us an example of what you mean there. Remember, you're talking to people who watch the LCS and go, "What a banger game 5!" So you're gonna have to give us a thought. What do you mean setting up when it's in advance for the dragon? Like, what do you have to sort of do to get set up to then have the dragon fight you want?
So for example, right, of course it depends on how much like time you have between dragons, but at least I know in NA EU sometimes it happens like, hey guys, 30 seconds to dragon, can you guys come? And then of course you cannot come because maybe you didn't fix the minion waves yet, you didn't finish farming yet, you didn't buy an item yet. But
I like
what
it when
meant, like,
TSM do that thing that I do. It's like a party of someone that I sort of know just enough that I have to like put an appearance in, but I don't want to stay for the whole party. So they just show up to the dragon, watch them take it, and go, right, I'm just going to slip on the back now. Like that's how TSM takes dragons. So keep going. This is different. I'm learning a lot here. Keep going.
So by what I meant by 4 minutes, right? So like so of course if somebody like your team takes the dragon or the enemy team takes the dragon, it's fine. And the moment you finish it, you have the timer already. So you have to start setting up for the next dragon. So you try to get vision or get control of the map. You can choose any side and you keep pulling the enemy to that side. Like first, if you want to control top side first, you go top side first. You control top side, you pressure top side, and you force the enemy to come to top side to maybe protect the tower, right? And then and the moment you know they rotate the top, you base, you go bot, and you keep trying to play ping pong this way until dragon spawns, and while they're defending like top lane, you're at dragon. So the enemy can never have setup.
Yeah, other ways you can do it are just like slow build a minion wave, basically, so that they have to make a choice between like losing 2 or 3 minion waves and coming to contest the dragon, or you time it so that you're putting pressure on the tower and they have to clear it out. You then get a recall to buy, and then you head to dragon, and they have a choice of like, okay, well, I cleared the minion wave. Do I have to TP and use a summoner? And maybe I have gold that I haven't spent yet. So there are many ways to get these kind of opportunities depending on the map state.
Yeah, and every team does it differently, right? Like for EDG, it's like they set up a slow push 1.5 minutes before, and then when dragon spawns, there's a giant wave under your tower, and then you have to think, right? Like, do I want to fight for dragon or do I want the CS? But if you do it consistently for every dragon after laning phase, there's no way they can win the fight on the 4th dragon if they keep giving up CS.
Right. I'm curious what you think about the general value that teams place on dragon right now. Do you think the teams overvalue or undervalue generally the first couple of dragons? And is there a team that you in the world that you think is very good around making the proper calls about when to take dragon and when not to?
I think Suning last year was one of the best. Oh, of course, like I've learned a lot from them as well, because I watch their games. I talk a lot to Sorat when he was in LPL, and so back then
you've disowned him now, right?
If anything, the opposite. Now he's rich. Now's the best time to be his friend. Now he fucking pays off all those years being his mate. You're all broke in fucking Taiwan.
That's true. That's true. I think. So back then, like, I think they were the first one who was telling me like, yeah, Cloud Drake is a waste of time. If the 3rd Drake or 3rd and 4th Drake is Cloud Drake, you don't even take it. You just play for gold, play for camps, and if the enemy goes and take it, you can punish even harder. And then the other concept is, if the 1st or 2nd Drakes, if they are Cloud, then you have to take it, because that means the soul will impact the team fight.
Now, obviously, Nelson is actually wrong with everything he just said there, because when actually Sword Art was like, right, well, looking at the game, I think we shouldn't take the Cloud Drake. What happened was Cadril just pops up, goes like that, fucking like in Mortal Kombat 2 when there were those developer would pop up. He would just pop up and go, well, actually, Sword Art, you're completely wrong, because Damwon takes that dragon. Therefore, it's obviously the best. Goodbye, I'm back for now. And then results-based analysis. Anytime you need him, he's like the fucking paperclip in Microsoft Word. He'll just be there with a little suggestion for you. Maybe you didn't know that the best teams. No, anyway, it's a joke. Just keep going.
I mean, I understand, right? I question a lot of analysis, which is,
yeah, you should, of course,
which has been public, right?
Yes.
Because I've talked to a lot of coaches who are pretty smart as well, but they don't put the content out in public. So
some would say that's part of being smart sometimes if you're a coach.
Not revealing all your secrets.
Yes, exactly.
It depends, right? Because for myself, like this spring, I did private coaching as well for coaches. There were a lot of like ERL academy coaches from EU,
I heard you even did some like really like high level. I know we can't name names, so we'll keep them redacted. You did some like high level coaching with this guy who used to be like a mid laner for some team in NA. He didn't know anything about the game. Like he just kept saying over and over again, like, then shouldn't the jungler do it? And then you were like, that's not the way the game works. It's whatever your name, redacted mid laner in NA. So anyway, that it wasn't fruitful, but at least you made some money off it. So keep going.
Yeah, I mean, the only reason why I did it is I don't have the faith that anyone would remember or execute what I said.
That's actually genius. Here's what's great, Monty. He actually understands what I learned a long time ago, which is I've always told people, I always give away the secrets to how I do my job in public. The point is, 99% of people don't know that you even fucking tell them a secret. They just go, all right, and then they don't ever apply it, so you're not even in any danger of them like catching up to you.
That is actually the secret of a lot of mystical systems, is that basically everything is always put in front of you, but unless you understand the relevance or the context of those objects or sayings, then it doesn't make any sense. This is a very strange example, but there's an example from the shaman that I did my initiation with, which is in like traditional kind of Central American religion, like Mayan tradition, they make bundles. So they take a bunch of sacred objects and then they place them within animal hides and wrap them up. And the idea is that the contents of the bundles are secret, or they are shamanic tools to be used in various specific occasions. And there's a story he told where a bunch of soldiers came and demanded that the shamans open their bundles, which would be kind of inconceivable in that religious tradition where these are sacred objects that need to remain secret. And his teacher basically just said, yeah, just show them the stuff. Just show it to them. Like, who cares? And the point is that they don't understand. Like, they open the bundles and they see a bunch of like objects, feathers, bones, and they don't even understand. So it looks totally worthless to them. And there's no harm in actually letting them see it, because they are outsiders and can't comprehend the meaning of the objects inside.
They basically unfurl the bundle, and instead of seeing what Monty's talking about, like, you know, sacred items, things that have incredible, they just go, I don't get it. How come when a fiesta happens in LCK, you call it a good, you know, like that's basically, that's you, Fionn. You're the guy, you're the soldier just checking the fucking bundle. I want you to be a member of the tribe. I want you to be initiated, but come on. You've got to, listen, first things first, let NA go. That's what you have to do, Fionn. The moment you let the weight of NA go from your heart, you will understand everything. You will see the world with new eyes,
exactly.
My friend.
It's your own desires that are holding you back from seeing objective reality.
Take this little pellet and meet me in the desert, motherfucker. And in about 2 weeks, well, you'll be straight fire, mate. You'll be like the new LS.
So anyway, the irony of me telling that story is that it in and of itself is like me opening the bundle to a bunch of people who won't understand it. So it works on so many levels. I really enjoy it. So hopefully some of you actually were able to take something away from that, but probably not. You probably just thought it was ridiculous. Now back to League of Legends. Now back to League of Legends.
By the way, along these lines though, like, let's contrast it then. Like, basically, what is the, aside from people playing badly, do you actually think like fundamentally FPX misplayed the final, Nelson? Because I actually personally went in, like, RNG had an amazing run and like there were so many epic games they had to pull out to get through. But I personally thought FPX was going to win this final. Like, I thought that the team looks like it's fully, all the pieces are there. They know how to play the game. It's going to take some like hero performances from the RNG players. Like, what do you think went wrong for FPX?
No, I think they just panicked or made bad decisions. Like for AD and jungle, I just think like in crucial moments of the series, they made bad decisions to engage or, you know, play Malphite like Tristana or, you know, like tactical. But I think mainly they panicked, especially in the last game where early in the laning phase where Doinby had the lead, and they should look to like snowball off the lead and see if they can hang on in the game, right? Because they were winning early on, but they went for an early dive and the game was like over after that. Like, they could have waited, you know, another 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and use Doinby's advantage in lane to do the same dive again. So I think that was the main issue. And at least for RNG, they played well defensively. And basically FPX only went in. So RNG just took the free win, right?
I think that to me was the most disappointing part of this, is that it was an exciting final, and I think it did contain some high level play. But what for me was so disappointing is that I really felt like LWX and Tian were not playing at their best. and that there were situations that those two players caused that basically allowed RNG to take advantage of mistakes they were making and kind of roll to the win. And it didn't matter, for example, how well Noguri was playing, because he was playing out of his mind in some of those games. And I really wanted to see more of a push and pull, but it really just felt like a lot of the players on Fun Plus Phoenix, Noguri in particular, just couldn't do anything to affect the outcome of the game ultimately. Like, it didn't matter how much of a lead he had on Xiaohu in the top lane, or how successful he was at turning around like 1v2s or 1v4s even, and making it an even situation. He was absorbing a lot of the pressure. But when Noguri is making these plays and like having these really good matchups in lane and getting ahead and drawing so much pressure into the top side, I wanted to see the rest of FPX like doing something or getting a lead elsewhere, right? Because if he is able to go even in those scenarios, surely the rest of the map should be able to take it and like convert that into some sort of advantage. And to me, that's what was lacking outside of game 1 of the series.
I mean, I think most of the time because RNG, they play really well around top side as well. So if you watch the EDG games and the games in the finals as well, basically top lane is like a 4v1. Because
yes,
I mean, it has always been like a meme in China. RNG only plays 4 versus 1, or four wards and 1 carry. But this time the carry is Xiaohu. So,
what do you think about Xiaohu's swap up into the top lane? Because I would say that what was interesting to me is that in the first series between RNG and FPX, he was kind of a liability, but he played a lot better and had a lot of help in the second series here.
I think in the first series, like RNG, they didn't have a clear idea on how to play for Xiaohu. That's first. And secondly, the drafts weren't that good, so that in a way that even if you help him, he can't actually do anything. But I think for the rest of the series, the rest of the playoffs, they have adapted well. Because I mean, if you have seen the game against EDG, he was playing Nara against Jace, and basically they just 4-man top lane at level 2 or level 3. So you just stack everything for your top laner. And even then, I still think they have a lot of things which they didn't have to show yet.
I think the secret strats that they didn't reveal yet.
No, I mean you can just imagine, right? Like if RNG plays against, like whatever you think of Xiaohu as a top laner, right? Like if they play against NA or EU, right? NA or EU, they first pick Nar. Yeah, I mean you might be playing against Orianna, you might be playing against Syndra or LeBlanc.
Yes.
Then how are you gonna lane? Because you never played that matchup.
Yeah, exactly. No one's played that. Yeah, of course.
Like the reason why he's so good is the same reason as why Prox was so good in AD before.
Yes, it's the same logic. It's not that they're just going to play the meta champion to be better. It's that they'll have the picks you can't play, and they know those matchups. And so even if you don't play it, you have to ban it. Like, just think of the edge it gives you in the veto, of course. Yeah.
The thing is, you can't ban it because there's so many, right?
We've got them off the top lane, of course. Yeah, there's a million ideas.
Yeah.
But what do you mean, Nelson? Just play Renekton into everything? I won't start. Kind of like, let's leave that one to one side. Put that down. Put the gun down.
I mean, blind Renekton is not very common because you can play so many more useful champions compared to now.
It's the way that was always the logic, though. Again, without starting the whole kind of their logic always was that thing, Monte, of like, but it's not that bad into everything. Then why blind it? If there's a million answers and a million solutions.
In China, you can play for mid lane, so it's different.
Yes. By the way, that's one thing I know we talked about this last year, Nelson, when we did that LCS episode, but I still can't get over it. If people want to do, so for a moment, I'll humor it and I'll take it seriously. If people want to do the Fion approach, where you're sort of saying, look, how is LCS that bad versus, LCK, LPL? Because look, like, it's similar, right? One area it isn't similar, mate, is go and look in the top lane for the last, I'm going to say, 3 years of competitive play. Here's how the LPL goes in top lane. They play something like 20 champions, and people, depending on how good their team is or what their style of team is, you play maybe just 3 or 4, but then he plays 8, and then they play, In the LCS, every year I watch it, it's like 4 champions and everyone just cycles those. And then people have goal with the 4 to be like, I can replay 2 with them. It's like, listen, I'm Reginald now. You should be working for minimum wage in a McDonald's. Like, what is this? How is he a pro? I'm going to go the other way, Theon. How is fucking the LCS top laner a pro player and the LPL one's a pro player, mate? That doesn't make any sense.
What I loved about seeing the LPL playoffs too is the matchups actually made sense. Everyone is saying in LCS and LEC, well, where's Aurelia into Gnar or into Jace, or having these preferable matchups? Yet nobody has the balls to play it in LCS or LEC. And to make an analogy for you, I really feel like a lot of the times, like you're saying, Thorin, in top lane, it's like, so if you're just at home and you're doing some work around your house, right? You maybe have 1 or 2 screwdrivers, right? And the screwdriver might not be the exact size you need, but you know what? It works kind of well enough. Like, it could sort of like put more pressure on it or struggle with it.
Yes.
Maybe you'll like strip the threads a little bit in order just to get the job done, right? Like one Phillips head screwdriver.
Worst case scenario, you could just smash it like a nail and make it go in Monte. It's sort of old.
Renekton is the screwdriver that sort of fits everything, but really is just going to be a struggle to get the job done. Meanwhile, the Chinese and Korean top laners are out here, and they're the professionals, man. They come up and they've got that entire like box set of screwdrivers, and they're sitting there and they're going to measure it out exactly and just pick the exact one to just screw that screw in perfectly. And that's an analogy of difference between like Renekton and the rest of the top lane pool, which you see much more actively in other regions. I would say especially in LPL, because I think LCK like gets into their own head about some of these metas and you just pick Sion 24/7. But yeah,
I mean they play Renekton mid as well, I think, in the LCK. But
occasionally, yeah.
But it's just that it's so easy to play Renekton against, the mages in the mid lane. Like after you have like Merc threats, the enemy mid is just gonna die.
Is it prioritized though that to be an elite top laner in LPL, like you have to play a lot of variety? You can't just main 2 champions or whatever.
Yeah, of course. There's no way you can only main 2 champions, right? In LPL, because like if you see this series, like support got 5 banned, and it happens very often that you just get banned, right? Like if you remember G2 playing against TL at Worlds, they just banned every single top lane champion, and Impact wasn't playing the game. So you need to have a huge champion pool, especially because a lot of the like so-called meta picks, the blind Gnar, the blind Renekton, you have to punish it. Like you just pick Quinn. You pick Quinn. If you know how to play Quinn, you can destroy both matchups. But I don't see anyone in the West playing it.
If you're Huni though, technically you do have surprise picks. You just go at any point in time for no reason. You just smash a glass thing on the wall and go, "I'll take Rumble." Like, that's not even being played right now. You're like, just get it anyway. Just give me it. Dude, he treats Rumble in 2021 like he was like prime faker picking against EDG on LeBlanc. Like, dude, this isn't something like you can't be beaten on it. Like I've seen you lose a million times.
I have some bad news for you, Thorin. Rumble's probably coming back with the changes.
I mean, I've actually watched the game. I watched the game. Actually, Rumble is good for that matchup against Gangplank, I think, or Gnar is good against Gangplank or Gnar. But the thing is, Rumble is useless against the 4 other champions. So
there you go. There you go. Damn it! Almost.
Close enough.
What about then? Let's flip over then. Let's talk a bit about Xiaohu then. If we did the whole breakdown before of Doinby, right? I want to get your thoughts on this, Nelson. What do you think of Xiaohu's career generally? Because I'll tell you, as someone who's followed the pulse of the community, he's run into 2 problems, mate. One, because he played in Uzi I teams, which were famously, like you said, like the old fucking Dota meme, like 4 protect 1. The premise everyone took from that was everyone else sucks and only Uzi I was the best. So no one sort of credits him for that. And then the other thing I've noticed that he also got fucked from is because he has he is considered one of the king of spring guys like Dade. Well, guess what? Worlds is never in fucking spring, is it? So he always looks the fucking shit in LPL, but so many times at Worlds, it's not he's bad, he just becomes not as good. So unfortunately, I feel like he's one of those players I can always tell the people who don't watch LPL don't really understand what his status within Chinese League of Legends is. What would you say about the career of Xiaohu here? He's now a 4-time champion.
I mean, I think he's known as the, how would I say, the king of civil war. So every time he plays in LPL, he's gonna win. Like he's known as the opposite of Xie. Like Xie always plays well in international. But I think the main issue is, of course, he was too used to playing with Uzi, because when you play with Uzi, your lane doesn't matter.
Yes.
Because he's gonna win the game for you for sure. If he can get ahead, he's gonna win the game for you. So your lane doesn't actually matter, right? Because I remember in a playoff game against RNG, which we played against RNG. We had a double kill at level 2 at bot lane, and that was like insane for us. And
I appreciate that Uzi doesn't even attempt, by the way, to pretend like he's a team player. Like the others, like everyone else's conception is like G2. G2's like the Avengers, isn't it? It's like, well, I'm the greatest top laner. Well, let's work together as the greatest jungler. Uzi is just Thanos. Like, give me everything, all the power, the power. It's like and he just deletes the other team. Like, what is this shit? Like, are there any teammates on your team?
Yeah, and the thing is, so we got a double kill in the early game, and we froze the lane, right? So he was kind of a bad spot. So the next thing which happened was that our mid lane was also winning lane and freezing the lane, and what they did was Xiaohu just gave up 7 CS and walked all the way to bot lane to fix the lane for Uzi.
That's a hero right there. That's a fucking hero.
And
Forgiven's listen to this going, see, I told you guys that's the way the game was supposed to be played.
It's amazing.
I mean, come on, like if you do that, then of course, you deserve to win. Like, because the players were like shocked that could even happen. Like,
No doubt.
How could the mid lanes just give up with cannon wave and walk bot lane to help AD and support who just got double killed? Like, it didn't make sense for them, right?
There you go. That's how OP Uzi's team was. He had a jungler that had teleport. He had 2 junglers. One played with him in the lane and one played in the jungle. And then he had another jungler that had mid lane items. Fucking hell. No wonder his team was so OP.
He had another one in the top lane,
And then the joke is, even though this isn't true, just for the sake of the joke, we'll pretend it is. And then what was his ultimate thing that destroyed him? Was it actually like, the greatest? No, it was Hjarnan. It was one guy going, I play high midding, like, oh, Jesus, get away from me, please. Like that fucking pyro meme or whatever from TF2. Like, that's the only thing that scares me. The little glasses. The high midding glasses. That's his PTSD, I'm guaranteeing.
I just love the fact that he has like 4 butlers on the map for him that will serve him anything. It's like, he's down there in bot lane just complaining that his wave isn't quite right. So somebody just runs and fixes it for him.
No, but I think the main thing is all the players agree that, the way we're going to win is to make sure that he's ahead. And I think like Xiaohu, the thing is after Uzi left, he was too inconsistent because like on one, he could lose to anyone and he could beat everyone, right? Because I remember at the end of near the end of spring or summer in last year, like Xiaohu was just 1v5 every game. Every game on Orianna, he could just 1v5, he could just drag his team across the finish line. But at the start of the season, he was like losing to everyone. Like he was losing, getting destroyed by Maple as well, stuff like that. And I think he probably just maybe like too bored played mid lane for too long, I guess. And he probably needed like some like new motivation as well. And RNG had a mid laner anyway. And since they couldn't get the top laner they want, then I think that was the only like possible swap they could do.
Also, by the way, even though I actually do personally believe the greatest players in all the roles, have like their own strengths, and you certainly can't say one role is better than the others. I can't lie. Listen, all the other players who play the other roles in League of Legends, you all are looking like mad trash now that like Perks and Zhao, who are just coming and taking all your motherfucking jobs and doing it as well as you and winning the championship. Like, I've been trying to defend you guys for years. Like, no, top lane is a valid role in its own right. AD carry has its own nuances. Like, it doesn't look like it though, does it? Like, these guys are just swapping and immediately win. Like, would you guys put up a fight, maybe, please?
I mean, a lot of the veteran top laners in LPL, they can play the same champions, right? But they still have the same like the same mindset.
It's like the ADCs, right? Like Doublelift. Like Doublelift's mentality was, well, why should I play the mages? Because eventually it'll just be AD carry champion, so I won't. I'll sort of like get ahead of it and not. But it's the same thing you're saying. Like, yeah, I'm sure some of these guys, like top lane has a lot of variety, but yeah, for some reason they also believe in like a meta that you have to play, right?
Yeah, I mean, like some of the players they think like very straightforward, and of course, like some of the coaches as well. Because I think in LPL, most of the playoff teams, the coaches have full control of the team. So basically, the coaches do the van pick. Of course, you have to prepare it with the team as well, but they have the final say.
That's pretty cool.
I mean, it's pretty common. So
I want to talk about some of the coaches that we had in these finals, just because I haven't heard an update on these guys in a while, and I want to get your take, knowing what goes on in coaching in LPL. Because what's interesting to me about kind of what was going on is if you look at Royal, right? Uh, if we roll back time for a little bit and we look at the last time that Uzi went to Worlds, which was in 2019, the year that Fun Plus Phoenix won, it was Stake, who's the famous former Taiwanese top laner, who was the head coach of that team, and was then replaced by Tabe, who a lot of kind of older school League of Legends fan will know because he was on analyst desks at Worlds. He's fluent in English. He's a very popular personality. So Tabe
was in Worlds Final for Royal.
Yes, that's very true. So Tabe also took over after Stake left, after kind of the disappointing, I would say, Worlds finish in 2019.
I think Nelson's mates with Tabe as well, by the way. I think that's another one of his like little crew. This fucking like Illuminati of like Southeast Asia or whatever they've got going on over there.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say, like the top 5 in LPL, 4 of the coaches, 4 out of the 5 coaches came from LMS.
Yes. Do you want to know the most gangster thing, Monty? You know when I jokingly, when Flash Wolves kept doing all those mad upsets of all the Korean teams, SKT, Rocks, I jokingly said, like, forget the players. Why is no one hiring this coach and stuff? Like, they haven't figured out how to beat Koreans. Yep. I don't know if people know this, but it's not a joke. Nearly all the teams that like won Worlds for China just took those fucking coaches literally from the Flash Wolves. Literally, those guys went and became the coaches of like, wasn't IG's coach as well? Also a guy from there as well. I know they also had the guy from Korea, but didn't they have one of the LMS coaches, Nelson?
They had a coach from I mean he was from LMS, but he went to China very early on.
Fair enough. Okay.
Yeah, but I think the most the weirdest thing is like both Tabe and Stake, they speak perfect English, so
they should have been in the West, logically, if people wanted them.
They could have been in the West earlier.
Yes. That was always the part I found so bizarre about that dude, is because, like, listen, obviously let's avoid all the dangerous words here, but I'll just say this, right? When people have the perception of the LPL players, like, they think, well, they're never going to speak English because they know even some of the Koreans couldn't speak to them because the Korean barely spoke English and the Chinese player barely spoke English. They were trying. What they don't know is most of the players I've ever met who were the LMS players actually had pretty decent English. Actually, I mean, I've told this story before, Nelson. I told people years ago they could have had people like Maple literally in the LCS, and they were going, but does he even speak English? I was like, that's your job to find out, mate, not mine. Like, what do I matter? I'm a fucking journalist. I'm not his agent. What is this?
I mean, Maple is still like from what I've seen, he's like the second best mid laner if he was in LCS.
Yeah,
right now he'll be the second best.
I think it's really interesting too, because Stake was always doing things with Flash Wolves. He was the coach of Flash Wolves during the entire era in which they were taking out Korean teams at Worlds, right? So he clearly had a very good idea, even in a weaker region, about how to make a team powerful enough to compete on an international stage. Were you guys on LNG at the same time? Yep. Did you work with him? Okay. So I'm curious what your take is, because he went from Stake was on both Royal and Fun Plus Phoenix at different points in time. Now he's the head coach of Fun Plus Phoenix. Tabe is the head coach of Royal. You worked with him on LNG. So what's your take on Stake as a coach? Because I guess it's a little disappointing that he was coaching Royal when they kind of flopped at Worlds, and then now he switched to Fun FPX, and then he lost to his old team. So I imagine that's kind of a bummer for him. But what do you think of him as a coach overall?
I mean, I think overall he understands how the players think and how to draft according to how the players feel in the game, at least, right? Because I know like some people, they like to like only draft scaling or stuff like that. I mean like LS, he like probably like is in love with scaling, and of course, I agree. Like he is correct theoretically, right? But I think how Stake thinks is, you draft scaling, but basically you draft comparable scaling from and it's also dependent to like the enemy's draft. Like it can't be that you draft, I mean, like you draft Nasa's top lane, you scale forever, but the enemy has already picked Kalista top. Like there's no way you pick champions like this. So you want to pick something comparable in scaling, and of course, because you trust in your own macro, your own setup, and your own players as well, you have to believe that you're gonna win the team fight, as long as you don't give too bad of a draft to your players. And actually, like all the LMS coaches have the same mindset. because of course they share a lot. Like they talk a lot about the game. Like all the coaches who came from LMS, they're all like very good friends as well.
Do you think that it's because all of these coaches are able to share ideas and sort of work together that has made a lot of these LMS coaches so successful at the LPL level? Or what do you think are the factors that is providing like all of these coaches with such success? Because it's kind of strange that everybody's from Southeast Asia and not from China itself.
No, I think it's just the sharing of information. Because I mean, of course, like you come into LPL, you don't know anyone else, so it's not easy to like talk to the other coaches, I guess. Yeah, and even RNG, right? So Tabi wasn't from the Flash Wolves compared to the other coaches in the top 5. Tabi wasn't from Flash Wolves. Their strategic coach, which is Poppy, he was my assistant when I was in LMS as well. But when everyone went to LPL, they connected. We have like group chats where we, of course, like we go out as well. But when we like talk about the game and like how to improve and what are the macro concepts as well. So we kind of like we share like some of the macro concepts and stuff like that, especially when the season ends. Because during the season, of course, we don't, because
Sure.
Because like what you can see, right? 4 out of the top 6 are from LMS coaches. So,
quick question: which Western team has the best macro at the moment, in your opinion?
None.
There has to be an answer. Come on, like what has to be the best? I know maybe not any good, but come on, give us one. There's got to be someone who's half decent. Who's the closest?
Because both finals have been very bad. They won
True.
because of mistakes. Yeah, I mean, if I talk about LEC, right? I think in Rogue they have better drafts. Like factually, they do have better drafts compared to Matt. But when I was watching the finals, I thought it was like 8 chokers and 2 players. It was humanoid plus Yoya, and the rest were all choking. But Rogue has so much better drafts. Their coach was smurfing.
Put it this way, when fans watch those games and they go, wow, Wukong really carried this game. That's like in the NBA when someone makes a really hard contested 3-point shot when my hand's in his face. If he makes that shot, I have to just go, congrats, you win. Like, there's nothing more I can do in that scenario. I want this motherfucker picking Wukong. What elimination point in the final? That doesn't even make sense. If he picks Wukong, then I'm supposed to go, great. That's the best thing that can happen for me. Like, that's not a mistake, guys. That just didn't work out for him, did it?
Because I think if you want EU to be a good region, I feel like basically Inspire and LUA, they have to swap teams. Like technically, Inspire is the best jungler from what I've seen. His path.
I agree with that.
What he thinks about, but he has LUA has something which Inspire doesn't have, which is like, I'm not sure how to say it. Like the balls. It doesn't choke.
That helps. The balls to go for players. Yeah,
balls. I would say balls.
Yeah. And Mad Lions as well. Mad Lions have better fundamentals because they know when they can punish. They know when enemy is inting, but their drafts weren't that good in the playoffs. But I think that was enough. That was enough to win. If, as you can see in the last game where Rogue had Baron and they showed like all 3 lanes had players farming in it, then of course Matt is just gonna fight and kill them.
Did you like the fact I told the story last week, Nelson, but I literally walked out to go cook dinner when Rogue got Baron, and I was like, I'll just watch the rest of this later. And I finished cooking dinner, and I walk back in, and I see Mad Lions like killing the Nexus, and I just yell, "What the fuck?"
Yeah, I mean, it's very basic, right? Like
I went back, and what was so funny about that game is just. I think if you had asked me before those finals who had the best macro, I would have said Rogue. But then I watched this game where they have Baron, they have a Fed Rise who is split pushing top, who is literally with Baron minions at tier 2 turret, right? And there's 4 players from Rogue in mid lane, and they're all sieging these turrets. And all they have to do is siege the turrets. And instead, what they choose to do is to walk into the bot side jungle, TP the Rise in, and then get all Gnar ulted and then Victor W'd into death and give up the Baron. And to me, it was just, I was in shock that they would ever do that. Like, why would you ever make that play?
Let me give you an analogy, right? There's a saying they have in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, like a grappling sport, right? Which is that the general order is you go like position over submission. And what that means is like, if I can get into a really dominant position, like I'm mounted on you, you can't throw me off. I don't then give that up to go for like a crazy armbar that if I did it, yeah, I'd win the fight. But like, if I don't land it, then you are now in a fine position again. That's what these teams don't get, mate. Because what Nelson's trying to explain there, expand on that, Nelson. Like basically, if you have the Baron in that setting, you at least don't show on 3 different lanes at once. Like, you at least don't show the opponent, like, look, we can't attack at a certain spot, and you can actually come and gank some of us. Like, that's exactly the opposite of what you do with the information, right?
Yeah, come on. Like, I mean, like when I was a rookie coach, the first thing which Peter Dunn told me was, if you don't see the enemy, and then like after you reset and you don't see the enemy, you just need to go S5 first, so that you can push the lane and you draw them out. Even if you're ahead, like the moment you play 3 lanes, there are so many accidents which could happen.
Indeed. I'm just shocked that they had the pressure, which was going to force Mad Lions to make a play, and then they walked into the jungle and TP'd in there without information. I just don't.
Here's what I would say if I was their coach, Monte, because I know the witty way you could get through to them. What you say to them is this, is you pause that VOD, because listen, you know that VOD review has to happen. It was game 5 of the fucking final. If I'm doing that VOD, I pause the VOD and I just go, did someone tell you guys that you win like twice as much prize money if you really humiliate them when you win? Like, you are away, just win. Like we were going to win anyway. Let's just win. Like, why are we going for like exhibition players here? What is this?
Yeah, I mean, the role basically like to skip steps, and they got punished really hard.
And I've said this, like, I do think that Humanoid and Armit had to play out those scenarios very well in order to come back into that game. And
that's some hero players for sure.
Sure.
Yeah,
like there were some really impressive plays from Mad Lions, but the scenarios that created those opportunities should just never have existed in the first place.
That's why actually the best part of that final wasn't anything to do with the narratives. It was actually the fact that you had this team that for some reason are mega good front runners and do on paper have really good players, but have like some character flaws right now as a team and therefore give the game away in Rogue. And then you had Mad, who everyone counted out the entire time, including up to the final. And then they just are players that have balls to make decisive plays. And guess what? If you do that, sometimes you're going to win. Sometimes you will just win off being decisive.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually quite a cool storyline stylistically,
Because I thought like Rogue basically won 4 out of the 5 games, but they lost the final, Because I don't think they were supposed. It's not possible to lose if you had
basically game 1, game 2, game 3, and game 5. Like Rogue on paper should win all those games. Yes, of course. Yeah. Agreed. That's why I actually thought fair play to Armut when we had him on Crackdown. When Dom, because he just knows, obviously, I don't pull any punches. He just asks me on the episode, like, do I really buy that Mad Lions is actually this good? And obviously I say, like, no. Therefore, to be honest, because I never lie when I compliment people, I wouldn't say congratulations for winning LEC. I'd be congratulations for getting away with that robbery. And I might even have to say, like, thanks. Because he listen, by the way, he knows. He fucking knows. Of all the people, he knows he got away with a robbery after game 3. He knows that.
I'm pretty sure everyone knows. Like,
so fair play to him. Yeah, fair play. At least he can admit it. Yeah, respect.
So now that we've had these
this
conversations,
motherfucker was trying to get that Turkish bread like me when I go to the kebab shop, mate. The superior way to eat it. Don't know why my country's eating it from pita bread still. I pity you fools. Get on that Turkish bread. It's the shit.
I think like when we look at this, we have to consider MSI as basically being a contest between the LCK and the LPL, because anyone upsetting either RNG or Dom1 is kind of inconceivable at this point in time based on the level of play. I think RNG did have a hiccup at the start of the playoffs, but they were still the #1 team in the regular split, and they still ran it all the way back through the losers bracket in order to secure the victory. And in the end, I think
they beat some amazing teams in the playoffs as well. Because remember, their double elim aspect meant that they just had to beat all the other contenders. Like whoever would have won that final, if people don't know, out of FPX and RNG, just go look at the teams they beat, mate. Like fucking hell, they were playing a murderer's roar. I know people have been complaining this year, rightfully so, about like the quality of LCK. LPL has no problems whatsoever. Like that is still a mega stacked league at the top. Like they can go 5 or 6 teams deep, no joke.
So with that in mind, if we think about RNG and we think about Dom1, Nelson, do you think that Dom1 is the MSI favorite coming through, or do you think that RNG has fixed a lot of the problems that they had earlier in the LPL playoffs that caused them to kind of get bodied by FPX and drop into the losers bracket?
I mean, I think I'm I still think Damwon is the most stable team. I think the difference between the Korean teams and Chinese teams at international events is that, of course, the early game, the aggression early game, the Korean teams can match it. I mean, Damwon can. I'm not sure about the rest, but Damwon can, right? They have showed at Worlds. But the thing is, after they get a lead, they just have a chokehold on you. They don't give you any chance to come back. They just play defensively. They allocate their lanes defensively because they know that they have a lead and they're not going to lose if they just go even after getting the lead. And for LPL teams, I feel, yeah, they know how to get a lead, but after they get a lead, they still like to win faster.
It's definitely true of a lot of the matches I watched that had some really crazy skirmishes that seemed pretty unnecessary.
I mean, I think RNG has technically you have a good matchup against Khan but I haven't seen RNG play different stuff at top lane for a while in the playoffs. I'm not sure if they would practice it, but I think they should because, I mean, if your top lane can play every champion in the game, then you should abuse it.
One thing I've always thought is like a meta hole that Koreans miss as well, the elite teams. One thing I noticed about Koreans is because unfortunately some of them still do seem to be locked in the mentality of like season 4 to season 7, where it was like you play the perfect. Basically, the premise back then was you don't gamble, you just play the correct scenarios where and in fact, you don't even take the 50-50. You go for like, I want to be like 65%, 70%, that's the right move. And you try and play the game like that. One area I always thought was totally misunderstood, by the way, and I'll now tie this, yes, to my fucking experiencing gold, motherfuckers. Are you ready? This is some straight fire analysis. Because here's why, Monty. Everyone knows the reason I'm in gold is because no matter how good I get on Pike, because it's the only champion I play, I pick it. But I pick it at all times, Monty. I don't care what the team could have 5 champions that destroy it. I pick it every time and go, this is going to be a hard game. And then the rest of my team obviously go, might dodge this, but whatever. So when I pick it, right, I can tell you, Monty, as a selfish little cunt who doesn't play for the team, I like certain skirmishes where I know I'm going to die because my champion benefits from getting kills. There's one area Koreans never understood. Dude, what if my comp is one where actually even just trading evenly in a skirmish gets the right kills onto the right carries that then turns into items and makes you win the... Dude, Koreans, that's like a hole where they definitely miss it in the meta. Like, I've seen some of them with a comp like that just play perfectly and only go, like, and never get a kill as a result. Like that's one of those areas where I feel like China was ahead of the meta. Like if it's the right carry getting the kill, it's fine for us to trade. Tell you what, your jungler can have those 2 kills. I'll have my AD carry having 2 kills out of a skirmish. Sure. Like that's not even an even trade, guys. Like people, it's cause people unfortunately dismissed like LPL out of hand. It's only now that they've won and we have to acknowledge that they're the best. People sort of are trying to figure out what were they doing,
It's even things that I find interesting about the LPL because it's not even, it is certainly what you're talking about, like not getting the kills.
That's a layman's version.
Right.
Yeah, come on.
Yeah, but it's also occasionally what I've seen is that they will force like a strategy that they implement is forcing fights even around the minion waves, right? So like if you can draw people into an even trade, but there's a bunch of minions that are dying to a turret at the same time, that is still an advantageous state. So if you see those opportunities, LPL is just much more aggressive about taking them, which certainly can work out in various situations. The problem is that if you take too many of those fights, eventually, like if you 50-50 it too many times, eventually you're just not going to be able to control the outcome. And that's kind of where it gets a little dicey, right?
What do you
the question
think,
is the value versus the risk.
Yeah, you must have some thoughts on this, Nelson. It's a bit meta. It's more like an LS stream discussion, but without 2 people who can't get jobs in the LEC going, yeah, I'm going to find a way to agree, LS. So go ahead. You can be the LS in this scenario, Nelson. I'm too cheeky, Monty. That's my problem. I'm entirely too cheeky. I'm irascible.
I mean, like you can see just from the way Alpha plays the early laning phase, right? In the first 2 or 3 waves, like I think if, like for example, if I had to give an example, it would be like just imagine if NA and you put an NA bot lane and a Chinese bot lane, and you just both let them play like Xayah or Rakan. And so what's going to happen is, of course, both Xayahs and both Rakans are going to press W and go in, right? And the NA AD carry is going to get hit by the W, and he will think it's fine because he trusts his support to land the W as well. But what's going to happen is the Chinese AD carry would flash at level 1 before he even hit any minion, just so that he can win the trade. And when I win the trade, I can snowball the lead to something else. So I use my flash to get a 200 HP lead when the game starts, something like that. and they know how to play around.
But the
it.
risk is obviously that the jungler comes by later and fucks you up.
Yeah, but like what I said just now, right? So what if you can track the camps, and if the jungler ganks you when his camps on the other side is up, it's fine.
Yes.
It doesn't matter because it's an even trade, so it doesn't matter.
That's true.
I think that's what the West doesn't think about, because there are so many really bad ganks.
That's one of the reasons, Nelson, by the way, why I always said we've got to stop pretending like LEC is G2 Esports with Perks as AD carry. Because, by the way, guys, those were the best team anyone Western ever produced. And even they used to get fucking toiled and turned apart by all the LPL teams. So bad news. If that was our greatest ever team, and they couldn't fuck with what the LPL was cooking up, I'm not feeling Mad Lions to win MSI, boys. Don't know about you.
I think it's just the work ethic, because a lot of when I'm not going to speak about the European teams right now because I haven't seen their scrims, but I have in the last year seen a number of NA scrims. And for me, it's just the discipline of day in and day out doing things like jungle timers or summoner timers, and like
stuff
just
that's
having
boring. Yeah, stuff that's not sexy, but you just have to do it.
Like there just isn't the same level of rote repetition in practice about like these types of intricacies in the game that then allows you to understand them well enough to make plays off of them, right?
By the way, if you're an ERL player who plays the game at a semi-pro to pro level and you're a jungler or a support listening to this show, I'm not trolling. Right this moment, start doing this now. Do what Monte said. Play with like a second monitor where you put the timers on or a notepad. If you just do that, that will get back to coaches and tell you what, if a coach hears that and he already was considering you, that's like porn to a coach. If he hears that you do that of your own initiative, your value is going to go way higher just for anecdotally alone. For real, it could actually be like a game changer for your player.
Only works in EU.
Wouldn't work in NA, of course, yeah. They'd go, you haven't even got 75,000 Twitter followers. How would I ever sign you to my professional team?
You're American? We're going to import some players. By the way, 100 Thieves, in case you weren't paying attention, is now a full import roster, guys. So here's another thing we didn't talk about.
Really? Yeah, I thought they had 4 Americans and Abbedagge.
That's right. That may be the eye test that you received, Nelson. But the facts behind it are that they are in fact a full import roster. So with that in mind, let's go back to the teams complaining that they need more import players. It's already possible to have a full import roster. I don't even understand the point of this. The LPL is going to have more money than the LCS, right? So you're never going to be able to compete with top players if you're the LCS. Reggie, I know you think you're rich, but you're not richest man in China rich, which is what the guy who owns IG, right? You're not major Chinese corporation rich, okay? So it doesn't matter if you guys get import rosters. You are never going to convince Chovy to come here.
Do you know the irony, of course, Monte, is that Reggie's actual successful business is an app which is best used to tell you whether or not the teams that are going to play the game are well created and balanced. And his company that loses money is because he doesn't know how to create a team that's pulled together properly, well balanced, and would have successful win. Like Reggie. The synergy's there, mate. You've just got to connect them. Connect the two.
That's an incredible.
It's mad, isn't it, when you think about it? It's actually mental, isn't it? Because if you don't know, by the way, in the modern day, especially when the drafts are fucked, the Blitz app thing's actually pretty legit. Just use it and dodge the game if the players are. If they have terrible winners, just dodge the game.
Yes,
it's worth it in the current meta, yeah.
I mean, as somebody, I'll do this as advertisement for them. As somebody who has used the Blitz app, it's very helpful It's very helpful to me to see that all of a sudden on my team, there's a top lane Kale who's 2-15, and I should dodge the game.
Oh, you know, if you're playing jungle, maybe I won't gank this top laner who's first time in this champion in this game. I might just go ahead and it might be a bot lane game for me this time. Boys. I like to know that info going in. You know,
I actually do that where like I'll start top or bottom side as a jungler just because I either see that my players have a very high win rate, or I see that their players are like a 20% win rate jinx.
Pure cynicism. What you effectively do, Monty, is you don't actually assume these are all sentient humans who can learn. And what you do is you just literally treat them by the numbers, and you go, right, fuck this guy. This guy could be dangerous on the other team. I'm literally going to like simplify this as much as I can. So there we go.
So yeah, so shout out to TSM for creating a tool that actually is useful, but for some reason they can't even learn their own lesson in professional play. Truly amazing. Truly amazing.
I mean, you can't use the app on stage, so.
There we go.
But you have coaches. I'm sure you're looking at those champion stats. Speaking of which, when you guys are doing the draft on stage, do you have printed out spreadsheets that have like player win rates on champions on them, or what materials are you guys bringing up there these days?
Are you allowed a tablet or anything like that?
No, it's a notebook.
Just have a notebook, fair enough.
Yeah, but I would say most of the time, the thing is, you cannot plan drafts. Other than what you want to ban, right? But you can't plan the draft. It's as simple as that. You just need to know the answers. The answers, like what are all the possible answers? Either in your head, because there's not enough time to flip on every page of the notebook on stage.
I've got a point for you. This is like an abstract point, but I'll throw it out there. One of the areas, right, in CSGO, totally different game, but I know Nelson actually vaguely follows it a little bit, right? One of the areas in CSGO that made me very unique in an analysis is I noticed in CSGO, our equivalent of the pick ban is where you pick the maps that you're going to play. And by the way, nobody ever put any time into that on the desks. They used to literally they didn't even used to look up the win rates. No joke. They would just literally say like, oh, I think they're good on this map, or I think they should pick this map. And you're like, but the other team bans that one. Oh yeah, I know that. Like, dude, even like pro players were just totally off. So one of the things I did, Nelson, was I studied like all this. I tried to get like all the win rates, but then what I realized was the next level isn't actually to figure out who has the best win rate, because even the other team could look that up. What I realized you actually want to do in that draft, which is why I want to ask this like meta related question in League, is the way I was able to get a very interesting angle on whether a team would pick or ban this is I was trying to figure out, based on what they pick and the win rates, what does that tell me about either their psychology going into the game or what they want to do in the game? Like if they're picking a map that seems strong for the opponent, that implies they know that one of his strengths isn't a strength, or they know that they have an extra strength. So in this sense, right, what would you say on this for the pick ban? Because I notice a lot of people also treat drafts either like you're only drafting your champions, like I've got some great champions, or like, oh, what is he doing with this champion into this in this lane? Whereas to me, I'm assuming some of the really good coaches, you're also going for that. It's like, right, well, if he picked this champion, that implies he's going to play this way. So now I'm going to shift my whole draft. There's got to be some of that involved, right?
There are some concepts that is like little stuff like that. So I'll look at examples later if I can find one. But I think most of the time it's just knowing what champions the enemy has played before, so that you can kind of make an educated guess, right? But you don't have like I have the full ban pick, because you have no idea what the enemy is going to do. Even for me, like the only thing I would do, of course, for me on my notebook is either things to remind the players about, or what is the worst case scenario. So of course, because I've went through all the scrims which my team played, so the worst case scenario would be, yeah, what if they ban like all the champions from my support? So what do I do? Stuff like that. I think that's the only thing we do, because why you plan for that? Anything other than the worst case, because anything other than that is a bonus.
I mean, you do mock drafts, though. I'm curious, against other coaches or within a coaching staff, do you guys ever do mock drafts against each other, or do you call up a coach on another team and just practice drafting?
I didn't. I mean, that's what the scrims are for, right?
Well, in a way, but it's different when you're playing 5 or 10, scrims, but it's different if you can in 30 minutes go through a bunch of potential drafts, right?
Because if you, at least from my own experience, like mock drafts, yeah, I mean, they kind of do help, right? But I think 99% of the time, when I actually get on the stage itself, because you only do mock drafts with your assistant coach, because you have to prepare for a specific team, and you can't ask, another coach. So what's going to happen is the assistant coach is going to use the worst case scenario, and then you're just going to panic. because you're both coaches on the same team, you know how to beat your own team. But that doesn't happen.
It doesn't happen because other people don't know the scrim results, so they don't know necessarily your weaknesses, is what you're saying.
Yeah, exactly.
That's fair. When I was working with CLG, we would kind of prepare those scenarios and talk about how drafts could unfold. Drafting is now more complicated than it was previously, because first off, there are just more champions in the game, and second off, there's a second ban phase now, which didn't exist. So it does make it more challenging because there's just more possible outcomes than there were previously, and more likely outcomes as well. But I am a little bit surprised that you guys don't go through any of those kind of coach to coach mock drafting endeavors, because it would give you some insight. Like you said, with your assistant coach, they know too many of your weaknesses, but just as an exercise against another head coach, I would think it might be kind of interesting.
It might, but no one does with like another head coach, because you just don't have enough time. And I think like you do practice draft to solidify like some drafting concepts, because there are like certain situations where you can blind pick. Let's say Azir, right? Since Azir is like a hot topic right now.
Sure.
Like no one likes to pick Azir, but there are certain situations where you can blind pick Azir, especially on red side, because the enemy have not picked their support or top lane, and the meta right now for support and top lane is tank. It's melee basically. So you can save those picks for top or support as counter pick, and the enemy can only go a safe pick like a tank support, and then you can punish. And then your Azir pick doesn't matter because Azir is good against tanks.
Okay, that makes sense. Counterintuitive initially, but that makes sense in the end. Okay. Bjergsen, I hope you're writing all this down. You've got your notebook needs so many more. Like your problem with your notebook is yours is like when people go on holiday and do that Instagram picture of the book they're reading, but only the first 4 pages are bent slightly, Monte. And you're like, is he really reading that book? I'm sure. So that Bjergsen, yours needs Nelson's is like fucking the Death Note or something, mate, when he's killing all those people hundreds at a time. This is fucking page after page after page. Mate, Ryuk's asked for his notebook back. That's how much he's written in it. Straight fire references. Keep going, kid. Down with the kids. That anime is about 15 years old now, so that's how far back I am. I've just watched Attack on Titan, Monte.
It's okay, Thorin. That was actually the last good anime that was released, it turns out. Because whenever I hear about anime, like every few years there's one that just gets super hyped up, right? And I'll try watching it, and it just turns out to be terrible. And the last good one I saw was Death Note. The first 13
they never tell you
episodes.
the good ones though. Like, the good ones, by the way, are the ones where because it's all like character driven. It's the ones where it'll be like some like the ones actually that are about sports can be good, or like a gambling one can be good. The problem is, Monte, I already know the ones they're telling you because it's people in esports. So then they're telling you, oh yeah, what's great is like, so okay, it's a bit like the others. This girl is actually like a vampire that's 7,000. Like, I'm out already. Like, well, I can't be the beginning of the fucking trying to sell me on the anime. Like, I'm not watching that. That sounds garbage. Like, what is this?
Also, Attack on Titan is garbage. Just before, let's get in on that one. It had like 3 good episodes at the start. This is the problem with anime, by the way, is that the concept is super cool. Like you hear the concept a lot of times, you're like, wow, that's really interesting. Like brings up very fascinating metaphysical questions, and then it just goes down the trash chute so fast.
And here's how you know. Are you ready for the most hurtful comment I could ever say about anime on this show? Here's how you know it's trash. Is once it hits critical mass where everyone in esports is saying all the episodes are awesome. That, by the way, I'm just going to say this, and this is going to really hurt people's feeling when this pill gets to the bottom and it actually starts to dissolve past the plastic casing. Think about this red pill for you guys. Everyone did the same with Game of Thrones right up until the last season. You all were riding so hard on season 7. Oh, it's still great. It's amazing. It was already degrading, you morons. Yeah, you guys just couldn't see. The problem is the other seasons went downhill gradually, and then the last season went off a cliff. The animes are like that. As soon as people are like, I can't believe how good this last season of Attack on Titan. Like, I'm glad I didn't watch it. It sounds fucking garbage. Glad I bailed halfway through the first season, mate. I was like, I got out quick. And he went to get out. Anyway, let's go back to the LPL. This because the problem is you might ask questions like this in the viewer question, to be fair.
That's fair enough. That's fair
enough.
It's
more of a viewer question answer.
We get back to anime and the viewer questions. All right. So we should wrap this discussion with Nelson so we can get to the viewer questions. Nelson, do you have any final takes on MSI? Do you think what would be the percentage? Because it sounds like you're into Damwon's consistency. What do you think their percentage chance of winning versus RNG's is? Like, do you think it's close? Do you think it's like 65-35, more heavily skewed towards Damwon?
I think Damwon against RNG is probably like 60-40 for Damwon.
Okay.
What would it have been if FPX had been? Would they have had a better chance or a worse chance against Damwon, you think?
Yeah, I think FPX would be same or worse, because I think RNG is the only one who can actually punish the top lane of Damwon. Right. And also, like, I think the other players, I think it fits, right? Because for RNG, their mid laner is crying, so like Tabi likened him to like Easy Hoon. He's just another turret.
By the way, the mid laner's name is Crying. It's not Reckless from those worlds. Like,
Yeah, he's just someone who doesn't lose lane. He's gonna farm up. He's gonna be a good or a great late game carry.
Oh, it is reckless. My bad. Sorry, my mistake. Yeah, sorry. It actually is reckless. It turns out, guys. So
Chinese mid reckless. I don't know though. Like I guess for me, looking at it, I am sad that we don't get to see, just for story reasons, the Nagari versus Damwon. Like I would have loved to have seen that matchup with Khan. I think it's going to be tough because, like you're saying, as good as Doanbi has gotten, I still think that Showmaker is the better individual mechanical player compared to Doanbi. So I do think that the possible punishment is going to be harsher within the mid lane. Even though I do think Damwon as a whole probably is not as good as the team that won Worlds last year. They don't have the same level of threat, obviously, with Khan in the top lane. And even if they did, the way that they have been drafting, like putting Khan on Sion 15 games or whatever over the course of spring, means that they are at least less willing to take risks or to have carry performances out of the top lane. So I don't know. I think the top lane matchup might be pretty boring when these teams go against each other. It might just be teams opting into kind of tank matchups and then the action helping or happening elsewhere on the map.
No, I mean, it depends, right? For you mean FPX or?
No, for RNG,
RNG.
versus.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, because Xiao could play. He could play what Cassiopeia. He could play Rise Top. So I'm not sure if they're going to practice it. If they can, it'd be great, right?
True.
Because you just punish all that. You just punish like the bad drafting.
To me, that should surely be the whole goal. If you're RNG, that's how you win the tournament. You know, that's like your one edge. You should lean heavily into it, in my opinion.
Because I think RNG, they have the better side lanes. You know, ball lane, top lane, they are better. I'm just like kind of worried for mid jungle as well, because they are also like rookies, kind of rookies. This is like, you know, their second split. Yeah.
That's why I want to see what happens in top lane, though, because my problem is this. I saw LS made a comment like this on his stream, so I'll reference directly to where I heard this, but his point was a very good one, which is that, like, it's true. If you look in LCK right now, because actually, unfortunately, the elite teams, as in the teams that have like Chovy and the players that are good, they don't actually at the moment tend to have the best junglers, unfortunately, except Damwon. As a result, Canyon just gets to basically just like, he has like the easiest fucking job in the world. Like, he just wins all the teammates win all the lanes, and then he's just free to farm everyone's jungle, including his own, and then win the game. And at the end, we all go, "You're the MVP." It's like, you are sort of, but at the same time, like, how much you get enabled is bonkers. So I have to say, I've never seen what happens to this guy when he gets the peanut treatment, which is you're used to having the 3 winning lanes, and now you don't get them suddenly. Well, my boy Peanut used to fucking collapse when that happened. So I'd certainly want to see what happens to Canyon if, for example, top lane isn't just automatically won.
I would say the other consideration is that when there was another good jungler, like I think Pioshik was very good in this season of LCK, but the problem is that he has 4 bums on his team, so he can't get anything done. So there wasn't another team that could potentially challenge for a title that did have a good jungler, and Pioshik was kind of trapped in like shitty laner prison. So yeah. I don't know.
Let's see at MSI though, because now's the chance to show, mate. If you really are the stud jungler, the best in the whole world, this is where you do it. This is where you get busy. There's not even any other fucking Korean junglers you're going to be playing, mate. It's just game on for you, right? Because that's the one area I have my concerns. Like, I actually think, by the way, obviously I'm not going down the Fion angle of like Cloud9's going to beat Cloud1, but I actually do think that, like, the interesting thing is this. If we go with the old matchups that everyone cares about, Europe versus North America, that's an interesting one, because now actually NA has their own angles. If you go with the old classic one of China versus Korea, that's a really interesting one. Not least, by the way, if people haven't noticed, this is a full Chinese team. This is a 5 Chinese player team. There's no Korean imports on this team. So if they win MSI, that's another massive, like really important moment in history, because all the teams that won Worlds in MSI before always had the Koreans. So there's your narrative right there. And I think that's a great matchup.
It's the next progression, right? Because the progression of Chinese teams went from IG winning World hard carried by 2 Korean players to FPX winning Worlds, where the 2 best performing players were probably Tian and Crisp. So they weren't the Korean players, right?
Yes.
And then now we need to go to can win international tournament with actually 5 Chinese players.
No, I mean, they won MSI last year.
That's true.
Yeah, because they did have like, you know, kind of MSI, because it was the Korean and Chinese teams.
Oh yeah, you mean the MSC? Yes, of course. I wonder.
Yeah. I mean,
there was no MSI last year, to be clear.
Yeah.
But it might as well have been, because probably the other teams at MSI would not have had a very good opportunity to beat them. So,
yeah, I mean, you've seen it worse. So,
Indeed. All right. Well, thanks, Nelson. We're going to do some viewer questions. So we're going to take a quick break and you can go to bed because I know it's very, very late there. But thanks a lot for joining us and talking about all this. Really interesting to get the insight, especially into the LPL teams and the coaching and all the what I now know is the LMS cabal that actually runs things in the LPL, which I had no idea about previously, but it's cool to hear those stories. So thanks a lot for joining us. And we're going to take a break, guys. When we come back, if you guys are in the Insight on Esports Discord and you do hold 25 grog coins, I will be looking at that channel to ask questions and we'll do a little bit of a Q&A. So we'll be back in just a couple. We're back with viewer questions. We'll go back to some of the ones from last week because I know we didn't get around to them. Here's a good one. Do you think playing on stage without a crowd is a good stepping stone for rookie/inexperienced stage players? Yes, I think absolutely it's very helpful because if you're playing on stage, you're playing in a different environment than you're used to practicing, but you don't have the distraction or pressure of a crowd. And that really does psychologically affect people. So I think that changing one variable at a time is probably the best way in order to create that. Unfortunately, teams don't have a way to mimic that really for their rookie players. So it's not something that many players get the opportunity to actually engage in.
Yeah, basically, it is exactly how if I'm a player now who came up, I would be framing it as like, well, at least I get to have some experience. And, you know, like obviously playing on stage is different than playing online. The downside is this. Like in the same way, actually, as in the occult, they have a famous saying, right? They say that like initiation never ends, essentially, because the idea is the process of being initiated essentially is like the process of being revealed some truth. So that never ends. That just keeps cycling and it's almost fractal, right? You go back later, like Monte was saying earlier, something that meant nothing before now means everything because the context has changed in you, not the actual object. So similarly, right? The problem is this. When I describe it as like a ladder that you're climbing up, like you have to start as like a good online player, then become like a low-level LAN player, then like a medium level LAN player, then a big LAN player who can play the big games, and then you go to the championship or whatever. You know, the reason I always say that, by the way, is because otherwise it'll never make sense to people. It's like when people tell me, Monte, that like Peyton Manning was a choker. I think he might have won like the second most playoff games in the history of the NFL, but okay, by your logic, he's the worst player to ever play because he didn't win them all, right? No, the point there is there's a level that he maybe where he had bad games in very big games. That's different. That doesn't mean you were choking all the other contexts. The point is he was an amazing player to this point, and then maybe at this point he had a couple of choke games in a so in the same sense though, the downside is this. There always have been ways to sort of half do this. Like the obvious example would be another reason I think a lot of the LEC rookies were way better than the past years is because in the ERLs, they used to have LAN finals in those like LFL and the fucking, although the German league, they used to have a LAN final. So you got some LAN experience, but all LAN experience obviously isn't equal. So that still won't help you when you go to Worlds. So that's another level. So I would say it does help, but it's not, put it this way, it's not really like you get 90% of the experience. Like you get like 20% of the experience, you know, and that other 80 could end up being the essential part, unfortunately. Really, the problem with all that topic, if people don't know, is no one can prepare because it's so many like psychological components that you don't know yourself. I've even seen players, by the way, who aren't chokers, who've just had games where they choked. Just on that one day, whatever happened, and you couldn't have prepared for it. The next time, they might never have that problem again.
And it's just weird the way your own brain works, too, because even if you're not a choker, if you happen to be, you know, somebody could push your button just wrong that one day. So, for example, if you're not super confident in a meta and you're getting a lot of tweets from fans or like reading Reddit that are shitting on you, then you can start to doubt your own abilities and lose confidence on that day from exterior factors, even if you think you're immune to it. And you could be immune to it 99% of the time. Could be like water off a duck's back. You could just that one day walk into the stadium and be like, oh shit, these people are right. And it only takes that 1 hour where you're doubting your abilities that to fuck with you. So I think it's impossible to tell, really, and it's impossible to be consistent, which is why sports psychologists exist, guys. That's their purpose, is to help try and alleviate these issues. Here's a question. I'm a game dev that has been getting into machine learning for game AI, and I believe it will eventually have a big influence on esports. Machine learning bots have applications both on the game dev side to help discover balance problems and on the player side where it is possible to make pro-level bots tailored to what players want to practice against. Could already be describing certain LCS teams. What are your thoughts about if all esports games become like chess, where there's always software pro players can use to validate their skills and practice against? I think it's inevitable, right? I think especially it's valuable to esports teams because if you can use machine learning in order to review all of the solo queue and professional games of a specific player or a specific team and replicate that play style, it's an extremely valuable way to practice. I think also something that's really underrated is that if you had that ability and you had a replay, let's say, here's the ultimate use of that. So let's say you as a team play a game and you fuck up and you lose the game. What if you could take a replay?
How about the Rogue Mad Lions example we were talking about?
Yeah. Started at, the Rogue Mad Lions. Started at that specific point in time, right?
Like resume from replay back in
resume
StarCraft,
from replay, and you guys you're playing your champions in that scenario, and you're playing against AI that mimics the reactions of those players, right? And you can experiment with different ways to come back into that game and find out what's the most effective. That's what I think is probably the most valuable, because right now, from a practice perspective, the biggest problem with esports is that in order to practice, you have to go into practice tool or you have to play out a complete game of League of Legends. In other sports, you can run drills off of specific abilities, and that is really lacking, or recreating a specific game state is really lacking. So it's very difficult to practice certain game states because they are infrequently occurring. But when they do occur, it's very important that you know how to play them out if you're going to get the win.
The main problem I have with this topic, it's one I've alluded to if people have ever seen in my Patreon stuff where people can like ask me questions. I've sort of alluded to this before, so maybe one day I'll make a whole video on it. But the problem is to make it I'd have to go really deep, like journalistically. Basically, my problem with the whole machine learning thing is the few areas it's intersected with the world of where I'm looking into things. It was fake, like they just lied. Like the Dota 2 example is an obvious one. Deep Blue in chess, like as far as I can tell, there's some of this was half of it was real, the other half was marketing, and they cheated. The devs, as far as I can tell, actually actively were involved in a way they claimed they weren't, because the machine was supposed to be learning, and they went in there and they popped a few things in there to boost it up and give it a chance to win, because it was exhibition. It was about marketing, by the way, guys. That wasn't about just trying to make some fucking super sick script or something. But I tell you where I think it would be interesting is, like Monte says, is to fill in the absurd gaps that still exist in League of Legends for practicing. Like an obvious one to me would be this. I would literally, no joke, like it if there were bots that you could put in that had like I'll give you an example. I remember way back in the day, someone linked to a clip where Faker on Korean solo queue played against a guy who was scripting. And this player he was playing, I remember vividly, was a Karthus player. And because Faker's so godlike, even though it's obvious this guy's scripting, Faker still was dodging like every Karthus queue, because Faker's so mentally ill, he would be like, I will see if I can beat the perfect robot, which is like, obviously, he did. By the way, spoiler, he was doing it. Like, he was like even in CS for like 10 minutes or something ridiculous, which should have been impossible. But basically, I would want something like that. Like, imagine if you could tailor like specific laning, so I could practice these levels, and maybe I put the bot on hardest setting. So maybe the hardest setting, if I'm bot lane, is like an Uzi I Forgiven bot that like punishes every time I CS. But tell you what, that'd be fucking amazing for learning when you can CS. Like, even as a pro player, these things could help out, actually. Because to me, that's like the ultimate training dummy, isn't it? Like, the training dummy does what I want it to do. It isn't just stood there pointlessly. Like sandbox mode's good in a sense, but it doesn't fight back. That's the problem, isn't it?
I think what's crazy about this too is it's not even just about one player style. If you could analyze every challenger game where a victor plays, like a professional level victor, and then you could figure out the ways that they were getting ahead or behind in every matchup, you could theoretically create a victor bot that would play out any matchup in the most ideal way possible. Now, obviously, I think this is technology that is vastly in the future, right? It's very difficult to create this, but in theory, it could be super useful for that. Even just sitting there and watching the bot play would probably teach you things, right? Even against
another obvious one. Here's another one that comes right off the top of my head, but this would be amazing for pro player. Imagine if, as a jungler, you could set up a scenario where you can pick the champions that are hitting the Baron, and then as a result, get a better feel for when the Baron's going to be smiteable, what they're ult likely would, stuff like, again, if you could control the variables, you could do a lot with these things.
As a follow-up question, do you think the implementation of machine learning and AI will change or affect coaching, assuming proper utilization and management of this tech in both individual player skill and macro play becomes standardized and essential at the highest level? And also, do you think this
time?
Yeah, not for a long time, but maybe. And also, do you think this will affect or change how Riot approaches their guidelines on coaching, on-stage rules, general requirements? I don't think it would change guidelines, because I think as long as you weren't using this in, like, weren't using this tech during the draft, I do think that there's something to be said for using it for prep, but then at the point where you're actually in the game, or like in the process of playing the game, that it should be on the fly and what the coach has in the notebook. Yes. I think there's something really compelling about that from a human and sporting and competitive angle. I mean, I don't want sports to be replaced by robots, right? So I think that's boring.
Put it this way, this actually exists in poker, where everyone who knows an online poker, you can download an overlay that'll just tell you all the percentages of the hands you're playing right now, and even guess at what the other player, based on his playing pattern, whether or not, you know, he like has a good hand or not. But put it this way, you wouldn't want someone in like an actual big poker tournament to have that on the real live table, would you? It'd fucking ruin it. You want the guy on the table in the final to just make his own choices. So I agree with you, Monty. Like, there's only a point to which this would run. Like, otherwise, at this point, your answer may as well be, and when will you just replace coaches entirely with a virtual coach? Like, that would be the next step down this line, wouldn't it?
And then when will you replace the players with the perfect mechanical bots that have been trained off of the professional players, like every professional player in the world, in order to play that champion or matchup perfectly? And then, by the way, we can finally arrive at LS's perfect scenario where we can see how the perfect draft will play out. It'll be LS's dream. It'll be LS's dream.
What LS would do, though, is this is the genius. He would go, and that ends the draft phase. Team A has won the game. If you'd like to watch the rest of the game, switch to my B stream where they will play out the game. But as I've just told you the result, Team A wins the game from the draft, and they would every time. So you would only switch to Team C if you didn't want more of that straight fire draft analysis.
There you go. There you go. No need to even play out the games any longer.
No point.
So, do you enjoy the mystery genre? If so, which works have you enjoyed? So, books or
movies? By the way, by that he means like Sherlock Holmes and like Raymond Chandler or something, I'm assuming, right?
Yes. Yeah. So for me, so the mystery genre is something that I find very specific times that I engage with it. So first off, in terms of movies, I think, you know, mystery movies can be really good. I enjoyed Knives Out, which is probably the most recent mystery movie that I watched. I tend to read in quotes because I usually listen to mystery books in audiobook form when I'm driving on road trips.
What sort of books are we talking about? Like Agatha Christie? Where we
I've had like, you know, like The Death of Roger Ackroyd, which is a classic.
She's pretty well known if people don't know. She has like absurd consistency, and like the amount how prolific she was is ridiculous, isn't it? Like she's just written 1 million fucking books, man. If you like one, you probably like them all.
Yeah, and so I tend to engage with mystery novels as audiobooks when I'm driving, because they're actually like, they don't require as much attention. Well, in some ways they do, but it's also because I'm like driving with my wife, and it's fun to speculate while we're in a car together about what's going on. Because I find it really entertaining to have someone else to discuss those books with as they're happening, right? So that's kind of when I do that.
Do you know what? I might do this because fuck it. Because
I love Sherlock Holmes as well, the original.
Yeah, the thing is, I don't really know this genre. I'm not really a genre person in general. I do really like Sherlock Holmes. That is one of the few things that like is not overhyped at all. Like, by the way, I'll already say it. For everyone who's going to go, yeah, I love the TV show, you are scum. No, literally, you are everything wrong with people liking show. Like, that show is fucking garbage. It had one good episode, and do you want to know the irony of all ironies? It's the one you all said was shit, which is one where he was in his mind palace with those, like, brides or whatever. That was easily the best one, because it worked on, like, 10 different levels. It had, like, an old-school home vibe with the new one. So you all hated it, of course, like Christmas special, whatever they did. That's a garbage show. And I'll also throw in there as well, right? When people talk about these shows, I'm going to ruin all the TV shows that are like this because they're not good quality anyway. Like the books are thrown into. Here's how you ruin every TV show that's a cop procedural. It's a mystery one. Are you ready? If it has an actor in it, right, who's a special guest star, and he's a movie actor or he's in other big TV shows. Spoiler: he isn't just going to be in it for the first 5 minutes. He did it or is incredibly involved with the murder. He will definitely be coming back because nobody casts someone for 5 minutes at the beginning of the episode. So unfortunately, when I figured that out about 10 years ago, it ruins all those shows for you. But anyway, enjoy. I've just just ruined them all for you as well. Now you don't get to enjoy them either.
So I will say, I do think that the modern Sherlock show isn't great, but I will say I like the actors in it. I thought Benedict Cumberbatch did a very good job.
Yeah, but that's the problem. They made it like a bloody body movie or something. Like what even is that garbage?
So I also just because they modernized it, right? They put it in the modern era. One thing that I did think was really clever is that if you've read the original Sherlock Holmes stories, you know that Watson is an Afghan war vet from the war that happened in the late 19th century.
With the modern one,
again. So he's like an Afghan war vet of the latest Afghanistan war. Sure. That was actually very clever. I really appreciated that tidbit. Now, I will say, if you want a good Sherlock Holmes TV series, go to the 1984 version that stars Jeremy Brett. I think is his name. Yeah, Jeremy Brett. No. Jeremy Brett. That's the actor. He is insanely good in that series, and those are much more faithful to the original. Really, really good. Really good. So if you want to watch Sherlock Holmes on TV, I would watch that one. If you could remove one expression or turn a phrase from existence, what would it be? Like yikes, oof, ratio. I would say ratio because ratio is so stupid. Come on. Ratio is so bad right now. Because the thing about ratio, here's what happens. Usually when somebody screams ratio, it's not even about winning an argument. Typically that happens because one side is super passionate about an argument and the other side is kind of just apathetic, right? And so there isn't like a strong conflicting set of views that's going to engage people. And the other problem with that is that these tweets or social media posts will be sent specifically into these like dens of scum and villainy discords, right? And so what happens is you'll be brigaded by people who don't even care about you or the topic because they're in some sort of like niche social media circle where it just gets cycled endlessly or like posted on some weird subreddit. And so then they all just come out and scream ratio and then just like crawl back into the woodwork where they came from and never care about esports or you or whatever you're saying again. So I find that pretty stupid.
My problem is this. The term I want removed from the lexicon at any moment in history changes because it's whatever y'all are just running into the ground next. So it's copium right now. That's funny for the last week. It's not going to be funny in about 6 months where y'all still saying it. Like, you'd same with all those terms. Whenever the new word comes out that everyone has to spam to oblivion. My favourite was one where it was actually a real league term and now no one says it, Monty, because it really had no definition because like 10 people used it. It was tempo. You never fucking hear that word anymore. By the way, it was a great initial like move into actually explaining meta concepts. But because everyone eventually drove it into the ground and backed out, we actually lack a term like that now. Now there isn't one. So basically it's whenever people just unfortunately like spam a word too much. I think any word can get destroyed if you do that too much.
Okay. Back to League of Legends. With the 100 Thieves Reapered announcement, do you think he can be considered the most respected / best coach in the history of NA? Seems like over the years, players have not been very vocal about supporting their coaches. Many people now think of Loco Doco as a failed coach, but we know more about what he actually did than most other coaches due to his years as a public person. This is true. What other coaches would be in the running for best in NA? Reapered, Zix, Kane, Prawley, Loco. So I think Reapered is definitely in that conversation, even though like it took him a while to win that title. But at the same time, you have to look at the team that was winning all the titles when most of the time was Reaper coaching, which was Team Liquid. And we could argue that they didn't really need a coach, given the like pound for pound quality of their players and arguably Core JJ sort of acting as a coach on that team. Like, I still don't know how much the coaching staff on Team Liquid actually does to this day, right? Or how much coaching they really need. So I think Reaper probably had more of a hand in the success, given that he was dealing with a lot more rookie players, right? Or new players. What do you think, Thorin?
The problem is, I do think that LCS is a region. Like, I have way stronger opinions about the LEC coaches because I kind of agree. To me, most of the NA teams barely look coached.
Yeah.
Like, if I actually ever feel like they do something, it tends to have to be an extreme case. Like, the reason why I gave Jat a lot of credit, for example, when he first joined Team Liquid, is because I knew that they had massive problems with Broxus. It's like, if I know if essentially you're playing without a jungler that works with your team, coach must be doing something. He probably actually has to put out a lot of fires, put together some sort of like a framework that works in these extenuating circumstances. But aside from that, yeah, a lot of the time, all you're doing is going, did they win the championship? Yeah. Well, then I guess the coach must be good. That's all everyone's doing. Like all that needs to be said about LCS is this. Almost everyone, including TSM fans, surely doesn't think Path was an amazing coach, but he has maybe the most championships ever for a coach. Isn't that like game over already that we can say that? Like, think about the other regions. You go and you look at the legendary coaches like Aaron from fucking EDG and World Elite, or any of the Korean ones. Mate, they have some legends in there. They've got people who've won worlds a couple of times or won multiple domestic. Like, well, LA doesn't really have that, unfortunately, because some of the names you listed are all good people, but they had up and downs. It depends what team they had. Like for example, I think sadly, Prolly will now be remembered like not very fondly because people think the 100 Thieves period was shit. I thought he did fantastic work in Europe. All of his teams were competent, like championship level teams, sometimes with no parts at all almost, you know.
Yeah, and oftentimes I have insight into the coaching because I'm one of the few casters throughout esports history that has made, I probably, out of all casters I am aware of in any title, I have made the most effort to get myself into team houses to watch scrims and to watch coaching. And my opinion of Prolly, from literally watching him coach, is that he was a pretty good coach. So I think there's a lot of, I think Prolly just doesn't get really a fair shake. And I think that he did do a lot of things right. And I think his time on H2K was really successful. I don't think you can really argue against that. And I think if we look at the coaches in Europe right now, they often are asked to do a lot with less. Like, how can we fault the Mad Lions coaching staff? Because we can tell now that they've replaced 2 players on the roster, run it back and done even better, that they legitimately have, unless they fluked twice, guys, which I think is unlikely. And also look at the conversations that we have with people like Mac and Dylan Falco, and you can tell that they kind of know their shit. It's unlikely that these people are poor coaches. But going back to the Stake example earlier, look at this guy's history of top teams, internationally competent teams over a number of years now. And clearly they're doing something right, but it is really, really hard in NA to get the same read.
You'll need to bring Dylan Falco back. He is North American, for fuck's sake. And look at the here's what they don't get right.
Meanwhile, Young Buck wasting away on Excel, dude.
What I hate, right, is when people don't have any eye test. So I'll give you an example, right? There's a scenario in which I wouldn't recruit Dylan Falco. There's a scenario where I would. Just look at his career. When he has the top talent and he's expected to win, he's had a bunch of fucking playoff failures and it hasn't gotten done. Give him a mid-table team and he's overperformed almost every fucking time. That tells me, by the way, that's immediately a sign that the guy has coaching skills, but they maybe just don't, like, maybe, look at the way he talks on camera, maybe he just isn't the most charismatic guy with a big star player who has a massive ego, but maybe you give him a bunch of players who haven't yet been top pros and he can help them figure out the basics of macro and how to play. Like, these are the things that the owners sometimes don't seem to take into account. Like, there isn't a good coach who fits every team. The question is, what do your team need? But I look at people like, Prolly was another example. If you have the right team, these people can be fantastic coaches, in my opinion. I don't think LCS actually has always made the best use of those people. Instead, I think they've just done stuff like was Song a good Korean player? Just get him on my team then. Like, for what reason? I just said he's Korean. Didn't you listen to me? Like, all right. There has to be more than that.
It is pretty lame to me that probably just never got another shot after 100 Thieves. I don't know. I think like, especially he could probably still be very valuable to a lot of NA teams. So I guess the answer to the question is, I guess I do think Reapered is the best NA coach of all time. I guess that's the answer.
By default, basically, though, he wins because the others don't really have any factors that go for him in that sense. You
know. Conversation starter rather than the question. Ask about the choice of veterans. So the example is the Fort Knox Rejects. I would generously describe their veteran as the man who once reached the top of Mount Everest, but was never the same due to complications from frostbite. In the LCS, judging by the choice of veterans, it paints a certain story. There are those who just
I'm confused. What is the premise again?
I'm trying to figure it out. Hold on. There are those who just did it to do it. If there are those who committed to it, and there are those who have the right idea but the wrong execution. In my opinion, your choice of veteran should in fact reduce volatile variables that a coach may have to worry about, such as banking on rookies to carry personality, teaching roles, certain aspects. It does not mean
right.
a roster with a ton of volatile factors can succeed, but rather it makes developing talent harder. True.
Basically, this guy's talking about like how you balance out the team you make.
Correct.
So, like, is it something
How
like
do you
what
select
positions
veterans?
you want? Yeah, like what,
yeah.
what do you want
Moving
to do
further
with
forward, I think the first question you have to ask when you see these types of roster is certain: do the veterans have factors that cause volatility, and do they reduce the coaching burden of a team? So he's arguing for a very conservative approach to using veterans. So the opposite of this approach is probably somebody like Huni, who has a very weird play style and like demands a lot of kind of strange factors as a veteran player, because it's not that it doesn't work, it's that it is a kind of bad way for training rookies on the fundamentals of the game, right?
I don't hate the premise of how he set it up. Like, if I had to make it very, very, very simplistic, that is like not too dissimilar to how I'm like, I'll give you an example. If you're going to make an LCS team and you want to pick a couple of veterans that are going to like Impact's an obvious one, because exactly as you're saying, he's going to reduce a lot of the volatility.
Yes.
You know exactly what you're going to get from him. He's got a very good work ethic. And so that basically, it doesn't like solve the problem. It removes the problem. That there's no longer a problem in the top lane. The question then is just, is he motivated? That's it. So I get that premise, but I also agree with you, Monty. Like, there's certain times where like my veteran might be the player that causes all the chaos. Like maybe he's some absurd jungler who just ganks all the time, but that might be what I want. Yeah, it depends what type of team you want. I think his concept, he didn't phrase it that well, because what he needed to stress more was the idea that you're tying it to the idea of like how you coach the young players. Because I get that premise. Like, if I have to coach, like, again, if I have Impact, we're probably not playing carries very often. So there we go. I've made it simpler as the concept of how the map's going to play out. I think the problem with this question was it was too abstract that we can really sort of like you should have been a bit more tailored as exactly what you wanted the question there.
Yeah, I agree with the principle, but it also just depends on how you're trying to build your roster. So I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all answer to that. I would tend to take the more conservative approach, though.
I will say, though, because this does make me think of one other thing, though, which is if you notice in pro players' careers, a lot of pro players inadvertently do what he's talking about, actually, Monty, which is once they become a veteran, they no longer think of themselves as a player who's just a good player. They try to actually make themselves one-dimensional. Like, think about how many, like, mate, it's actually mental, how many amazing, sick mid laners just become mage bots. How many by the way, people like Yankos, who used to be the best gankers, are like, I can't play the champions that gank. Like, you can. Like, they just... What happens really, Monty, is it's sort of like what he's saying. What they discover is oftentimes the boring tank / simple one-dimensional... Like, that has an obvious way to play it, so you can be very consistent with it. They then don't want the variance of gambling on skirmishes. So I actually think that's just pro players, actually. Like, again, no one ever made these guys... Like, you actually do lose your reflex at 25. They just believe that for some reason. Why they believe it's beyond me. I think it's cope personally for when you have a bad slump, you know. But my problem is that they never come back from it, unfortunately. There are a lot of players who put themselves in a box. Well, I don't think that's necessary, you know. Like, a lot of these players could do other shit for sure. Odo Amne himself did this, by the way. I've mentioned this in the past. He used to think of himself as just like the weak side bitch player. And I used to tell him, like, dude, you could just do both. It makes sense in certain teams to do that. Doesn't make sense if your player... Like when you, here's the thing, if you're forgiven as the AD carry, do that. If you have, like, when you have the nuclear lineup, maybe don't do that. Maybe sometimes you play the carry, you know.
Well, I also think that it's the players themselves who, as they become more veteran, don't have to play the game as much in order to maintain their form.
That helps.
But at least their form at professional level in terms of macro or decision making, but they aren't willing to play enough to keep up their mechanics potentially on new champions or champions that require more consistent mechanical practice. I think that's a huge part of it as well. How much do you think LA/California culture hurts NA teams? If esports happen to be centered in Dallas, Chicago, Miami, would being out of the West Coast have a tangible effect on the scene as a whole? As somebody who hates LA culture, I think the answer is no, because the league's full of people who are not from California. So I don't think we're all being somehow oppressed by LA culture. Like, I don't think it's hurting like the European players or the Asian players or players from the East Coast. I think I think it doesn't matter where in NA they are, there would still be the same problems. That's what
To me, I would just characterize it differently. Like, first of all, I'm obviously not from America, so I wouldn't claim to have expert knowledge of these areas. But I would say, to me, the misnomer here is the idea that you're doing it regional. To me, the problem in American esports is this: it's corporate culture interacting with gaming culture. Like, one of the reasons I do think, Monte, that you hear these ridiculous stories where, like, you can't just, like, bluntly tell someone who's on your team, like, I think you did bad in that game and you messed up here. Dude, they're making it like all those HR nightmares you hear about in companies where it's like everyone has to sit and you have to discuss in like a super passive aggressive manner, and like, well, what hurt my feelings about that, Billy, was like there's no time for that in this setting. Like, that you have to think of the game, it is a proxy for war. In the middle of war in a fucking trench, we're not having a polite discussion. It's like, get the musicians, this guy's gonna get bombed, get down. Like there's no time for that in that scenario. Like, that's the problem I see, is I think like the sort of HR culture of like, don't hurt anyone's feelings, that's the bigger issue to me as far as an outsider, you know.
There are two industries that HR really just can't fuck with, and that's like competitive sports and entertainment. Because in competitive sports, for the reason you're saying, like, you have to improve as fast as you possibly can, and there aren't a lot of time for people's hurt feelings to be dealt with. You just kind of have to cope and get it over with. And then in entertainment, because in order to know where the line is, oftentimes, as we all know from being in caster green rooms, you have to go over that line while you're just bantering behind the scenes to figure out what's going to work in terms of entertainment value. And this applies to acting, any kind of performance, music, art. And so if you introduce HR into those situations, it will really like kneecap the final product. So yeah, I think those are both disciplines that could use with a little less of that.
Put it this way, basically trying to say that you can HR approach, make entertainment work is like the reason why everyone thought that the LPL inted all those years, because their logic is like, only take the skirmishes that you're ahead in. Why the fuck would I know that every single time? It's happening in real time. Sometimes I'm going to take it. I'm only going to realize halfway through, fuck, this is actually, Monte, a 30% for me. Like, that's what telling jokes is like. Sometimes you're about to say the last line, and you're like, fuck, this is already shit, but I have to keep going. I can't just go, I quit. Like, there's no fucking hitting the X in the corner. You have to go through with it, don't you? And then just sit there with the silence and everyone going awkwardly smiling at you. Listen, local, whatever.
If you could insert yourself into the mind of someone within the LoL community and spectate a full day with access to their thoughts, so this is like being John Malkovich.
Oh yes.
I might have to pick Reggie. I just want to know.
The problem with that is, though, you say that like that. Listen, that's a funny premise, but don't you think that also might be like the ultimate buyer's remorse? Like, if 5 minutes in he really is just going, bro, you're nailing it. Like, that would be really, oh, they've got a whole day this to go. Fucking hell. This guy's an idiot.
I'm pretty sure I know what he's thinking. So.
This is what, and then not only that, Monty, it's a whole day. So you're just going through all the shit that hits the cutting room floor, those fucking documentaries, not even the good shit. You're just going through him going, will it be Chipotle or In-N-Out Burger today? I'm feeling like Chipotle. Like you don't understand what it would actually be torture for you, mate. To actually be trapped inside his mind for a day.
And people would say, like, I think a lot of people be like, well, I want to be Faker. I'm like, Faker's a guy whose favorite drink is literally water. Like, I'm pretty sure I don't want to be inside.
Oh, here's the joke. The joke should be, it's one of those careful what you wish for, Monty. Because they should get their wish. All of a sudden, they're behind his eyes, but no one said you know Korean. So you're just hearing him speaking in Korean and his thoughts like, what? No! That would be like, that would actually make you go mad. You'd lose your sanity completely if you didn't know the language. Like, be insane, wouldn't it? I'm trying to think who would be a good one, though, for this. Ooh. I'm trying to think what would be like a fun angle to go with, though. I have to say, I would actually probably pick someone boring to most of you guys. Like, I would actually just pick like a really high-level player and like one of the best teams in the world. Just 'cause I'd like to know, like, what really do they do every moment of the day? Like, do they have like for example, do they have their own little routine? I'd love to know, for example, say you're one of the absolute best players like Chovy or something. What does he do in the extra hours he puts in that maybe his teammates don't put in? Like I'd love to see those subtleties. That's more where I'd be interested to know, you know.
I think purely for comedy, I would want to know what it's like to be Grabs last year. I want to know what it's like to be a spectator in that environment and what like level of decision making he has.
Oh, I'd love to know, Monty, what it's like to sit there going, you know what? accomplishments wise, I'm at the top of my game right now. Won MSI, no Western coach ever done that. Won all the LEC splits, almost won Worlds. You know what? Next year, I've got to get one step further. I've got to win Worlds and then knock on the door. What are you doing here? Perks comes in. We've decided to swap roles again, but this time he's going to be ADC. Trying to fucking sort. No one's even won Worlds before from the West. Why are you doing that? We just decided to be more fun. Yeah, I know what you mean, Monte. It's different challenges. Certainly different challenges to other courses, isn't it?
I am curious what goes on behind closed doors in the G2 grab situation.
Oh, wait a minute. Now I know who I need to be. I need to be Sam Matthews during that last off season. Can't be one day though. I need the whole off season. I need the whole off season because I need to. I could imagine, he's writing in his diary, at least I've got Reckless tied down, now who can I get for mid? Like, this would it'd be amazing. The payoff at the end, incredible.
All right, what would the hypest battle rap card esports could produce? I'm not sure if you mean like people who actually rap or in a theoretical universe where everyone
I think he means if you put like Bjergsen as Jensen or whatever, it's like that sort of angle he means,
I think you got to have Uzi as one of them. That would be pretty amazing if Uzi could actually rap.
Well, the joke on his would be he does rap, but he's one of those rappers like I'm going to say like T-Rex from Dotbot, where like I'm pretty sure like their mates write some of the lines as well. Because in his case, he'd have like 4 people just feeding him all the line, and then he just gets all the credit. Yeah, exactly. That would be the 4 protect one.
It's the Cyrano.
Cyrano de Bergerac. Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I can tell you in esports, if you wanted people who have actually rapped to see the most cringe rap battle, you would go with Freak versus DDK. That would be
pretty bad.
That would be pretty bad. You can actually go and Google Freak rapping or DDK rapping and experience that for yourself.
One of the areas that you do signal that you are a low class pleb is when you get really excited that people can do the rap god. Dude, as someone who actually enjoys hip hop, I remember clicking on most of these clicks and just going, all he's doing speaking really quickly. It's the same casting. He just went 3 times. He's not even rhyming anything. Like, there's no rap. He's just speaking really quick. That doesn't, by the way, I'm not super impressed that the best play-by-play commentators in the world can speak 2 times faster. Like, that's their shit, dudes. Like, that you're too easily amused if that's really like the shit to you. Come on. Some of them are funny occasionally, but most of the times they're not. They're just speaking twice as fast. Come on.
I would want to see Imp in a rap battle. I think actually he would be pretty great.
Oh, he'd have good personals. Yeah, he'd be saying things that hurt your feelings.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, of course. I think Imp would go all in, so I'd be into that. They've not asked me critically. What's Thorin's opinion on Soccer Super League? Also, did he have any connection to any local team in any sport as a kid, or is he mostly a fan of NFL and NBA?
Right, basically, the quick version is like I'm not really a fan of soccer/football at all. Like I used to like it when I was like a kid, but that's because it was the only thing in England basically that everyone was into who was poor. Like, well, I don't have a fucking cricket bat, do I? We don't follow those sports. And I was never actually someone who supported a local team. Like, first of all, I come from the Northeast. We don't have any good teams. So I used to sometimes go to like Middlesbrough football games, for example, when they were in the Premier League. But I'll spoiler to see the other team. So I would just wait till like the team I like Liverpool came. Then I'd go and watch. This is how you know I come from a real place, unlike all of you. I wouldn't sit in the Middlesbrough section of the crowd like an American does, where they go like, you know what, dude, you know when like in the modern day, with no respect for history, in like the fucking Celtics arena, like the TD Garden, a fan will go sit in the Celtics part with like a Lakers jersey on and cheer when the Lakers score all the points. Like, what? Like, mate, if you'd have tried that where I was coming from, when the other team scored, like Arsenal came, yeah, you could do it, but about 10 seconds later, you'd be down the bottom of the stairs with your head smashed in. So I would never even have thought to do it. Like, when I saw that in American sports, I was like, this is a different, because in England, it was just people who are going to drink beer. Like, in American sports, you have your whole family there. Like, it's a different experience for sure. So no, I was never really into football that much. So I don't really know much about the European Super League thing. I'm just watching it as an observer. What's funny is we can talk about it now because it basically, inadvertently, is Monte's idea that he wants him to do in League. So I'm more interested, because obviously we worked with Flashpoint and CSGO, I'm more interested from that angle. It's sort of trying to do like an Overwatch League / LCS type approach with a franchise league with the companies that you think are worth it and lock everyone else out. I get why they're doing it. So from an esports side, we could actually get probably some interesting topics on it. In terms of the actual football thing, I mean, the reason I can't say I have an opinion is because I don't watch football anyway. If anything, by the way, say, and this might blow your minds, I'm actually more likely to watch football if they have this league.
That's
I might
what
just
I
watch
said.
this league. You know?
That's what I said. I mean, people tell me I'm a dumb American, which might be true. But at the same time, I think that this approach, I would not be interested in other forms of soccer, but I might actually watch some games of this one, because what pisses me off about soccer, and people will just be like, well, watch Champions League then. Well, first off, sometimes I have. And second off, why would I just want to watch Champions League one time when 90% of the games that teams play are against garbage teams in their own region where they just kick the shit out of them? It's just not good competition. You need to centralize the highest level of competition. And this is why I was advocating for League of Legends creating a new league with basically teams from all over the world. So for example, Riot would pick the best partner. So they'd say, okay, well, the most successful teams in terms of competition, in terms of infrastructure. And what I said specifically at the time was that I don't like Riot being kingmakers in this regard, but they would have to do it, and I would accept them doing it in order to achieve this result. But it's like you say, okay, Cloud9, you're no longer going to have an LCS team. LCS will still exist. You're going to have a LoL Super League team, right? And so we're taking away all import restrictions, and here are the 20 teams that are in the Super League where you can sign any player you want, right? And people were saying, well, what about the local competition? Well, if you want to prove, the French and Brazilian leagues are doing great right now, and they're doing fine at the local level, right? They've developed fan bases on their own. I think people would still watch LCS. They would still watch LEC, but it's ridiculous that the fans, we are the ones being robbed of being able to see consistent high level competition. And if you guys ever want a team of NA players to get good, they have to compete more frequently and be able to practice against these top teams. And the way that you do this is that you say, okay, for the spring split, the Super League is going to be in China. And for the summer split, everybody's going to go to Europe, right? Or you move them around from month to month and you have it be a traveling show that's a big spectacle. And ideally, you'd run this in a tournament format. So all the teams would travel together. They'd be able to practice together so that you would see some level of parity, right? And then you have them play a tournament and then they go away. And the only time you see these teams, I would say soccer is not taking it far enough. Like, in my opinion, Manchester United should no longer play in the Premier League. They should just play in this other league, right? That's what I want.
I will say, though, because one thing I will point out that actually very specifically I can address that maybe no one else can is I know a lot of people, the immediate problem is kind of what you alluded to with if Riot did it, which is that who would be the person who picks the orgs? It would be Riot. So the main concern obviously is you don't want a world in which maybe Damwon's like far and away the best in the world, but their org's not that been around for that long. But then T1, let's say T1 sucked, or KT would be a great example, but you pick them because of the history of the org. And then because the problem then, right, is then you must rely on the teams like you will in the Super League to sign the best players, right? Now, in theory, they're incentivized to do it, but as someone who worked with Flashpoint, it might not happen. Let's do that.
and you know what? That's not even the scariest part, Thorin. The scariest part is that if you gave certain teams access to the Super League as the biggest esport in the world, you would basically be handing these teams, you would basically, like if Cloud9 were to become a Super League team, their valuation would go up enormously. They would get more investment, right, across the board in esports. So what's nefarious about this is Riot would not only be king-making for League, they would be king-making for every other esport at the same time, because the very value of that League of Legends team would ripple out into all other esports because they would just have more money. So basically, Riot Riot might like this. They have the opportunity basically to set up for decades in the future at this point in time where they create this, the fundamental powers of global esports. That's a power that they have right now.
I've got one last thing to say on this topic and we'll move to the next question. It goes like this. Are you ready? There's not even going to be any jokes for this or any sugar to make the medicine go down, but you really need to take this medicine, guys. I want to do a little thought experiment for you really quickly, right? You know when Monte gives all those opinions about League of Legends and esports, and you're really interested because you know Monte knows a lot about League of Legends and esports, and then he has the audacity, right? He switches to a topic like soccer, and you don't know what level he has. You don't know if he's ever watched it. He's American, right? You know that feeling you get of like, like, but I don't want to hear his thoughts. That's us with any thought you have on any topic ever till the rest of your life. So go ahead and do us a favor. You know that feeling? Keep that same energy for me, dude, and don't hit tweet on your send.
Well, what I love about people telling me that is like, I'm not pretending to be the biggest soccer fan in the world, far from it. But unless you are literally a professional working in sports, the odds that you have better ideas about how to run sports business or better insight than I do is very low. Remember, I am a commissioner of a league, right? So, I mean, I see clear business advantages and also competitive advantages. And here's the other thing people don't ever mention about that sports league. Do you guys really want UEFA and FIFA, who are highly corrupt organizations, running your sport until the end of the time? You should welcome this to take some of the power away from these people that, frankly, don't deserve it and have abused it. I would love for the Olympic Committee to also be taken down a peg or two. So there are advantages here, both from a business and from an ethical perspective, I think, and from a competitive perspective. And I know a lot of people don't like it, but there is good in here. There is good in here. Monte, you announced on Twitter that you advised on an RTS game. Can you provide a bit more information on what the game is? And is there another RTS you can compare it to? Yes, it's in the early stages right now. Doa is also advising on it. Victor from Team Liquid, Huck. So, some classic RTS people. It's by a developer called SunSpear. It's called Immortal, Gates of Pyre. It's in the pretty early stages of development still. Basically, I'm talking to them about how they can kind of set it up for esports success from a skill ceiling and viewership perspective. I think they've got some really good people on the staff who are very much taking cues from like classic RTS like Brood War, which I really appreciate. And they're very focused on skill expression within the game. And as somebody who really wants a high skill expression RTS to come back, I am happy to give them my time in order to help make that happen. So yeah, that's it. Do you have any thoughts on RTS, Thorin, generally speaking?
Not really. It's not really my genre. Like, what people don't realize is I actually, in the end, did find out once I became like more knowledgeable about the game that like StarCraft Brood War, the actual game, is a very, very good game. But the main reason I started following it is because basically it's my dream of what I want the esports scene to be. Like every player to be properly compensated, to be enormous like potential rewards. So you can be like a Kobe Bryant, you put your whole life in the game. You can be a lifer, it can last 10, 15 years. You have all the best competition. Basically, it's like if you're just an elitist in an esport, like StarCraft Brood War was like the ultimate game. But that was also partly the Korean scene and the way esports. So I'm not actually like that big an RTS guy, to be fair. As you can see, FPS is more my shit.
Yeah, I am very much an RTS guy, and I like many genres of esports. It's like I would still watch CS:GO, I would still watch League of Legends, but as I've said previously, I really miss. And I talked about this on the Crackdown with Thorin and Dom. If you guys want to go check out that episode for a longer conversation, because we won't have it here. But I really miss the kind of beauty of having a very public, like S tier viewership 1v1 esport, and whatever that is, whether it's RT, I think RTS is the best genre, though some people would argue Quake. I think that it's disappointing that we don't have that right now, because I think it offers a really different viewership and storytelling experience, and I just miss it. I miss having that in the forefront of esports as a place where we can discuss it, and people will say, well, StarCraft is still there. Yes, but I'm not going to make a show about StarCraft because no one will watch it. So I have to make, business decisions. And so selfishly, I would like these business decisions to be reflected. But the problem with RTS is that it's the model has been broken. So like, I think StarCraft started to get it right. I think you need to have co-op play. I think you need to have team play in order to convince people who are casuals to stick with the game. I think you need to have like custom maps like used to exist in Brood War and Warcraft 3. So, and I also think that selling a $60 game is an outmoded concept. And I think you have to do a game as a service free to play. And I think that SunSpear, this developer, is doing all of these things. And I really like that they're thinking about how the casual user experiences the game while still kind of trying to go back to the core of hardcore RTS that Brood War represents. So they also have like a lot of ideas for tons of factions, and I think they figured out very interesting ways to balance that. So I would just say keep your eye on that one. I'm going to keep doing my best to help them, and check it out when it comes around. They will be doing more tests and throwing out alpha keys and beta keys and stuff eventually. So that's what I got. All right. That's the last question we've got for today, guys. So we got through a bunch of them. If you guys would like to ask questions, we do have the cryptocurrency grog coin at rally.io. If you get 25 grog coins, you can join the channel. Then we'll answer those questions. Keep doing that. We haven't had a 4 horsemen in a while. Nothing stupid has happened recently. God bless. But keep an eye out for that. Remember to follow this channel. And I do not know if we will be back next week. If we are back next week, it'll probably be with some sort of historical episode, I would guess, because there's just not a lot of recent games.
We'll put our heads together. We'll see if we can think of something good.
Yeah, I think probably we'll do, if we do an episode, it'll probably be a nostalgia episode before the start of MSI, and we actually get to see international games again because all of the MSI teams have qualified, so we don't have games to talk about. So we'll think about it, and stay tuned on Twitter, I guess. We'll tell you if there's a show or not. You can tell we're really well planned here. All right, guys, thanks a lot for watching. We'll see you maybe next week or maybe for MSI.